Want to welcome VCAM. We had a working session, 5 o'clock, wastewater disposal ordinances for West Charlotte Village. The issue will be continued at 5:30 on Monday, December 16th. Are there any adjustments to the agenda?
No adjustments necessarily, but I do want to point out that we may, at some point on the agenda, be talking about litigation, and we may want to do that conversation in executive session.
Okay.
Okay.
Would the select board updates be a time we could
Sure.
address that? We good? Lost Frank. The park is here. Okay, the 601 agenda item, selection of the lessee for agricultural leases at the Trailhead Park and Wildlife Refuge and at the Galbreath parcel.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Andrew Milliken, representing the Charlotte Park and Wildlife Refuge Oversight Committee. And we are here to talk about a recommendation for the agricultural lease for the Park and Wildlife Refuge. We did email earlier some background information. I'm going to go ahead and provide that to you, but I'll summarize it right now, just to make it easy. Just to review, we had 2 candidates submit proposals for the 5-year agricultural lease for the Charlotte Park and Wildlife Refuge and the adjacent Galbreath parcel in response to the request for proposals that was issued by the town on October 15th, 2019. Those 2 candidates are Dylan Preston from Guinea Road in Charlotte and Tom Cariano, who lists his mailing address as Essex Junction, Vermont. In terms of process, the Charlotte Park and Wildlife Refuge Oversight Committee reviewed the 2 proposals, interviewed the candidates last week on December 4th, discussed the results, and contacted 5 references and other individuals with knowledge of the candidates' relevant experience. And then the committee just met prior to this meeting to review the results of those reference checks and to develop a recommendation to the select board. Just to review a little bit about the proposals, Dylan Preston would provide an annual lease payment of approximately $4,402. Tom Cariano would provide an annual lease payment of approximately $2,928. The difference then is a $1,474 higher payment by Dylan Preston annually. That works out to about $7,370 higher payment over a 5-year lease period.
Were those both on the same acreage?
They were based both on the same acreage. Dylan calculated that differently for the unrestricted part of the Park and Wildlife Refuge. Tom Cariano had one set fee for the total acreage, so we just calculated the total for those.
Thank you.
And just a reminder, the restricted fields are precluding early mowing for grassland birds. So the approach that the 2 would take, Dylan Preston would utilize a conventional approach of mowing and using a variety of mid to large sized equipment, conducting soil testing and supplementing the fields using manure and possibly fertilizer on a rotational basis based on those test results. Tom Cariano would focus on improving soil, likely mowing later, using small and mid-sized equipment, testing soil and plants and supplementing the fields based on testing using compost and manure and diverse planting to reduce the compaction of the soil. Like I said, we interviewed them, talked with references, reviewed the proposals, and we just met. And based on that, the Oversight Committee unanimously recommends that the lease be awarded to Dylan Preston based on the higher lease payment, the experience working with farms in town, the willingness to test soil and supplement fields, and willingness to continue using organic farming practices.
The only question I have is, we've run into a situation where the margins on the fields and how they're going to be cared for. And all I want to know is, are you clear on how those margins around the edges of the fields will be cared for? Because, I mean, someone else helped me out here.
We don't want the hedgerows growing.
Hedgerows growing up.
Yes.
I need to say a couple things. One, just so there's no conflict here, I used to farm my fields. Dylan now rents them. So if anybody think that's a conflict, I'll be glad to
You just
excuse
said it, so
myself.
it's not. You just disclosed it.
The other thing is in those 3 years that Dylan has rented my fields, anytime I ask for something, it's done within the next day or two, whether it's trimming the hedgerows back, whether it's moving a hay wagon. We know where he lives.
Or the Mayflower truck.
He shows up and gets it done when you ask him, which I think is something that is rare these days.
I just was, clarity
Yeah,
question.
Louise, to answer your question, yes, I think it's fairly clear that the Park and Wildlife Refuge Oversight Committee works on the management of the hedgerows and invasive species. There is actually an interest potentially in doing some mowing around the edges of the fields for grassland birds, but that's a separate issue. Yeah.
That was my point, that apparently wasn't clear, that he does that to the fields that he rents from me without asking. Because as most farmers who are trying to make money on it know, that if you've got a half a mile around your field and you cut another 12 feet, you just got another couple acres worth of productive land.
And the Wildlife and Refuge Oversight Committee actively manages those hedgerows.
Correct.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, that's perfect. I'm all set.
And you're okay with the time frame on leaving the bales on the property?
Yes, we discussed that, and
I know that was a question beforehand, last year or the year before. We talked about the bales being removed.
yeah, I mean, our preference is that the bales are removed as soon as possible, but we understand the challenge of doing that in terms of selling and transporting the hay, and in our discussions during the interviews, found that it was okay to, if we were allowed to pick where that was going to happen, that would be okay. And Dylan in the interview indicated that he would have those bales off the land by late fall, early winter.
We had the presentation, very well laid out, appreciate that. It's always challenging comparing bids. We have a recommendation, is there a motion?
Motion to award Dylan Preston the Shop Park and Wildlife Refuge agricultural lease.
Second that. So you were done, sorry.
I didn't know if there was a date I should put on there.
It's basically for 5 years, beginning in December, or beginning in January 1st. But also includes the Galbreath parcel lease,
Okay.
lease for the Galbreath parcel.
Friendly amendment?
Yes.
There's a motion and a second, more discussion? Sue?
The Galbreath parcel was included in the RFP, but we don't manage the Galbreath parcel. The park does not.
The town does that as,
That is a town.
okay, as part of the town lands.
And what do we do with that?
It's put out to lease without restrictions that the park committee has put on, or not the park committee, but the ordinance puts on the park.
It's like the inverse of the brush hogging contracts, instead of paying people to maintain it.
Yep.
Is there?
Oh, I'm just wondering if it should be a separate motion for the Galbreath.
No, if it's one lease,
If
it
it
should
was
be
one
one
lease.
motion. If you had
Well,
two separate
and-
leases, it could be two separate
Right, it
motions.
says proposals for the 5-year agricultural lease for the Shaw Park and Wildlife Refuge and adjacent Galbreath parcel. So it must have been an RFP for both of them
Mhm.
as a single, so.
If that's something to, if it becomes problematic, we could review doing it differently
next year.
in
Or 5
2024.
5 years.
Sue?
So does that mean that we would manage that property according to,
No, I think the town is just entering a contractual agreement with two properties, but they're being managed separately. I don't think it changes the management structure.
Although we have no problem with the Park and Wildlife Refuge helping out with that respect. If they still feel they can.
But no, I'm not asking the park to take on that responsibility. It'd be status quo.
Yep.
For future discussion.
Yeah. Just waiting anything. If there's no more discussion, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dylan.
Hey, thanks, Dylan.
There's an empty barn over there that we should probably, the Thorpe barn is right next to that. At some point in time, we should think about making it pay for itself. Why not put hay in it if it's next to the field?
Yeah, you could pay to restore it, you mean?
It's already fixed. We keep paying to keep it empty. It's like, let's get a little income instead of.
That's a good idea.
Blow away if it's full of hay.
Next agenda item, the presentation of Moncton road repair. Would you introduce yourself for the record, and thank you for coming?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Select Board members, for having us tonight. I'm Galen Hagan with Du Bois and King, and this is Sean Kelly with Sanborn Head and Associates. We're working on the Moncton road repair. I'm going to give a couple-minute history of the project as well as update on the work that's been conducted, and then hand it over to Sean to discuss some of our geotechnical findings so far. So to jump right in, the slope failure or road failure is just south of the Moncton Road and Spear Street intersection, about 1,200 feet south of it. Basically, the road has the western lane, northbound lane would be is getting eroded away for some reason. The most recent failure was spring of this year, 2019. And it was approximately 200 feet long, although there's been quite a few other failures dating back as early as 2016 and 2017. When the failures have occurred, the road crew, Junior and his crew, have gone out there and put some stone and sometimes grubbing material to fill in the void space, as well as to hopefully stabilize it. But unfortunately, that has proven to not be a long-term solution. So that's what Du Bois and King and Sanborn Head are looking into. And then usually after the repairs, the road is just graded so that it's passable again. This is our topographic survey of the site. So far, we've conducted 3 soil borings, 2 of which were full depth, and 1 of which was a shallow boring on the opposite side of the road of the failure. We also conducted 2 test pits. You can see a fairly large one down here, which was basically to trace the problem back to where it potentially started. So that was work that was done recently. We also had Junior and Gary from the road crew out there, who had a lot of the history of the repairs when certain stone and repair material was installed, so we could kind of date the repairs. And on that note, I'm going to hand it over to Sean to go over some of the geotechnical findings.
Great. Thanks, Galen. So I'll just jump over here so we can get on the mic. So as Galen said, we did 3 soil borings. Originally, we did the 2 deep ones, and then we did one across the street just to see if there was a change in the road base. Initially, when we prepared or evaluated those soil borings, it wasn't very obvious as to why the road was moving the way it was. The soil's right below the road surface. It's a very stiff clay, and so we would have not expected that roadway to fail. So then we suggested to Dean that we go back and do some test pits to actually open up the roadway to see, what the soils were and what the treatment was on that slope face. When we did the soil borings, they're only small 3.5, 4-inch diameter holes that are, drilled vertically down, so you don't get a good broad explanation of what's below the roadway. So water table does not appear to be the issue. We did see some water at the bottom of the test pit, but that doesn't really mean that was the cause of the failure. So when we did that test pit, here's a picture of that hole. So the roadway's up here at the surface, and this is actually looking to the west, failures to the east. So you can see the stone that's at the surface now, it's the blue-gray, like 3-inch minus stone that they did to repair the edge. Then below that, historically was placed that whiter stone material, same gradation. And then all of a sudden, as we kept digging, we encountered the crushed shale, which is below the roadway surface. But what was curious was we found the edge of that shale out almost 10 feet from the edge of roadway. So in essence, what has been happening is, as material has been placed, the roadway surface has been going down and out. So we're seeing a slow creep failure of the clay soils right on the edge of roadway. And as each repair is done, we add weight, and that exacerbates the problem and further failure. So what we're looking at here is just a cross-section of what that long test pit was. We dug it from the top first, and the excavator had only so much of a reach, so we dropped that excavator down into the side of the hillside there and excavated out to the bench that you can see here. So what you have is the blue stone at the top, the whiter stone, which was placed about 2 years ago below that, and then the roadway surface, as you can see, is moved out from where it is existing out about 10 feet. The soil borings wouldn't have told us this information, just because we're only looking at a small vertical profile. This is now an elongated horizontal profile, which really helped in our helped to decipher exactly why the roadway was moving. Again, the native soils are very stiff, so we wouldn't have expected the edge of roadway to move out. Our assumption is over the years, as the roadway has been graded, potentially some soil has been pushed off to the edge, and over time, that soil has made the clay on the edge fail and push out. Another indication of, where was the old true edge of roadway? There's a buried communication cable that was since, taken out from, removed from, wasn't removed but replaced and put overhead in this section of roadway. I don't know if the select board knows that had happened, but in this section, the cable that went off the one of the electrical poles down into the ground, then paralleled the roadway surface, was pulling off the poles because it was being pushed out from the edge of roadway. So we actually found that cable about 10 feet off of existing roadway. Also, there's,
Excuse me.
sorry, it's okay, but also in this material that we excavated, it's definitely not native material. We found some trash debris in it, so historically material had been placed on the edge of roadway, at least along that bank. So, what can you do to fix that problem? So adding more material is not what you should do, because the more material you add, the soil has gone into residual strength, meaning a weaker condition. So every time that we add load to the edge of roadway with more material, as it settles, it's a domino effect. It will continue to get worse. So there's two suggested repairs, and both of those are removing weight from the edge of roadway. So you could do that in one of two ways. You could remove all of that stone fill, remove some of the fill soils below the stone fill, and get down to the native stiff clay and replace it with lightweight fill. So that could be an expanded shale rock aggregate. Or another option could be to replace it with geofoam. So so we actually did before we did the test pits, we did look at stability of that slope surface, and this is just a diagram of us trying to figure out why or how that slope could have failed. So when we do this type of analysis, we're looking for a factor of safety, and that's what that box is up top. It's showing a factor of safety of 1.4. So that's conditions that are existing today. When we design a slope repair, we try to shoot for a factor of safety of 1.3. So this is showing that the slope is stable. But obviously it's showing a slip surface that's a very large slip surface down to the wetland, out to the field below. Our failed surface is, up in this area here. So if you go to the next plot, what we did was we reduced the assumed strength of that soil, and we still show a factor of safety that's just below 1.3. A factor of safety of 1 or less is failure. So this was why we went to Dean and said we really needed to do a test pit because there was some other things that weren't obvious via the soil borings, because all of this information that we have here is related back to the soil boring. So if you go to the next slide. So what we're suggesting is this would be the repair area. So we're going wider than what has been repaired thus far. We'll taper the edges. Again, you can see where we did our soil borings in that one long stick-looking areas, that long test pit that we did down the edge of the slope. So what we're suggesting here is either use that lightweight material or this geofoam material. And if you go to the next slide, we sort of show, what would that look like in concept. So geofoam blocks are, they come in different sizes, but to fill this mass, they're usually 4 by 4 by 8 foot long, and it's truly foam. So it's styrofoam blocks, but it's high density. So it's like a styrofoam cup material, but not soft. And when you place this vertically and on the edges, that compressive strength that you get out of those foam blocks is higher than what you would get with the soil. And how this is benefiting this type of repair is those foam blocks are really, really light. So this condition for this type of repair usually see for bridge abutments over really soft clays. So when a new bridge is going in and you want to span over an existing roadway and the material that you have below the bridge is really soft, instead of putting in deep pilings, they use this type of material behind the abutments so you don't get consolidation settlements of the roadway approaching the bridge. In our condition, we're obviously not putting in a bridge, we don't have any abutments, but we do need to bring the roadway back up to its current elevation. And we know that the material that's out there now on the edge of the roadway has caused that roadway to continue to slough, or what we call creep. The clays beneath the material that has been placed are creeping or failing down that edge. So the only way that we see to repair that would be to place either a lightweight fill or this geofoam block. So we haven't, I guess I'll turn it over to you in terms of cost, in terms of what this means to the town in terms of that type of repair.
So basically, lightweight fill is the answer. The big question is what type of lightweight fill, how do we get there, and probably the biggest question is funding that's available for this. So I spoke with VTrans a few days ago because the structures grant is the funding that would be ideal for this project. The problem with the structures grant is that you need a culvert that's greater than 36 inches in diameter or a wall. If it doesn't meet those two criteria, you're not eligible. So I called our contact over at VTrans and said, hey, we have a product that we've used in the past in Vermont. It's held up for the same application. It's held up very well. When was that project done? Early 2000s?
Mid 2000s.
So 10 plus years ago, it's held up very, very well. There are some constructability details that need to be followed with this geofoam. It's just like any other product. There's a correct way to install it. So those means and methods would have to be determined. But when I mentioned this to our contact, she said, it looks like you're stacking blocks and making a wall even though you're filling over it. So there's hope that the town is eligible for this structures grant. That is not confirmed. So that is the next step. That is the immediate next step, is to see if the town is eligible for that grant. If they are, it's up to $175,000 with a 90% grant money and 10% covered by the town or local monies. So it's a very good grant program. Again, it really does depend on whether they classify this as a structure or not. So next steps then is to really get you guys the structures grant eligibility, which will hopefully be this week. And then we can also put together a couple cost estimates of different material of what's available around here. So basically, we'd probably be looking at a lightweight stone material, that shale that Sean was mentioning, versus geofoam. Obviously, the shale has its benefits. You dig a hole, remove the heavier material, put in this lightweight material, cover it. It's a little easier with the blocks. You're placing blocks. There's a membrane that has to go over the blocks. But again, I think a lot of it's going to come down to the VTrans structures grant eligibility. Yes, Matt.
What height would the geofoam be making up?
Probably 10.
Probably close to 8 to 10 feet of it. So a significant amount. The other thing that we'd be looking into further is the frost protection on them. So basically, you're only as good as the drainage that's around these blocks as well. So there's they do not like petroleum products. They will disintegrate with petroleum products. So basically what happens is the blocks are placed, styrofoam blocks. It's nice rectangular, usually stepped structure, and then they will be wrapped with a membrane and then welded. All the seams will be welded together, so there will be no gaps. And then we'll also put an underdrain system around the slope repair, regardless of which repair we do, just because we want to get all of that water that is coming either groundwater or coming across the road away from the slope, so that it doesn't fail.
So there'd be 18 inches of road on top?
Yeah, you'd go back to the same road section would be placed on top of that, either lightweight fill or the geofoam block.
And then 8 to 10 feet below that would be this geofoam or
Yeah,
lightweight
so
fill.
this section here, every box is 10 feet, so just to give you a scale.
Yeah.
So, here's 10 feet here, here's the bottom of that fill, so it's about 15 feet down to there. But this face is, that's where the native hard soils were. So we would want to, we don't need to repair way out here.
Right.
So we need to, remove this weight, but geometrically you still have to, be able to place the blocks in a geometric fashion, right, that it would be stable. So, we're probably taking out that chunk and half of that, so maybe a little bit over 10 feet for part of it, but because we're on a slope, out here is not as deep, quote unquote.
How many feet long?
So that's what this
So
diagram.
the repair would end up probably being about 270 feet long, and as you can see with this, it's kind of hard to tell, especially with the shading. But basically, tighter contours, these dashed lines mean that it's a steeper slope. The steeper slope is where the failure was. and you can kind of see that the stone repair, you can see some contours out here, especially in this region and in this region, that haven't failed, but are still very similar to the same topography as where the slope did fail. So although it's not a pre-existing condition, it's something that we want to mitigate now, or we would recommend mitigating now. There's obviously costs associated with that. So one option is to stop the repair where the slope failure is. The problem is that there is on this side, probably a 25 foot section on this side, maybe a 30 or 40 foot section that still raises concerns for us, that we would not recommend repairing the immediate problem and maybe not the future problem. So while the material is being moved and the equipment is on site, it would be our recommendation to expand that repair to the full extent.
I just want to run the spectrum of options.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say the town did nothing.
Yep.
It sounds like would the road fall apart? How
Yep,
bad
so
would the
you've dealt with
deterioration
it,
get?
Junior's here, so you've dealt with it for a couple of years anyways in the most recent past. And those repairs would probably become more frequent. So every time you put load on it to regrade it and get it back up to grade, it's that domino effect, you're making it worse.
Right.
So I guess in the short term, and if you didn't have enough money for the full funding right away, maybe you could dig out, half of the stone that's there now and put back a lighter weight material to sort of get money back in the bank, meaning you can use the soils that are there now, but if we start to unload those soils, to give you a rough frame of reference, the stone that's out there now, you could say is 130 pounds per cubic foot. That's what the stone weighs roughly. Lightweight fills half that, 60 pounds per cubic foot. So you're gaining, if you excavate out 5 feet and put back that lighter weight material, you're reducing the load on that slope. So you could do that in the interim, but my guess is if we don't take out all the soil now, for the full repair, you'll always be shimming that road because you're in this, what we call a residual strength of that clay soil. It's past its peak strength in shear.
And this is wild idea generating early. That's probably the biggest structure I can think of in town, 300 feet long, 10 feet tall, synthetic material. And I don't question the engineering piece of it. It seems like that's the best fit. Is it possible to do this with 4-foot culverts and stacking them that distance? Is that cost prohibitive?
So culverts are meant to transport water from point A to B, and the water is not the issue here. We thought honestly that was one of the things we seriously considered up front. There's a ditch on the east side of the road that constantly has water in it, and we figured, hey, maybe there's a layer of soil, of clay that this water is just seeping right through and moving the material. We dug a test pit about 3 feet away from that ditch, below the flow line of the ditch, so the bottom of the ditch, and it was completely dry when the ditch had a lot of water in it. So if we put culverts in, it still doesn't alleviate the main issue of there's weight that's on this soil that's already failed.
I guess I didn't mean functioning culverts. I meant burying them as a stacked structure that reduces the density underneath the road but could still support the use of the road.
That's a very interesting concept, and it's using Yankee ingenuity, really.
That's
because
my limit.
Right, you're reducing the weight on the clay soils below, and I could almost envision a bunch of culverts, going this way. And you're creating almost like a steel bridge that has a bunch of holes in it.
Almost a floating bridge.
Right, so
It's hard to compact under a culvert, though.
that's the thing.
Generally, if you don't want your culvert to wash away,
circles-
you gotta slurry it with some sort of
filling in between them.
to stop it from washing out. If they were square culverts, size-wise.
The other, I see.
Then you're looking at like
the
creating a
concept.
bunker.
The other conflict, I think, would be with the depth of, so that,
Yeah.
clay that we have, that stiff clay that we have is actually a great material for underneath the road. The problem is, you can see it drops off at the edge of the road and it's quite deep. So to get a culvert, you'd either have to have a deep culvert to really alleviate that, or a big one to have enough weight taken off of what's below it so that it wouldn't fail anymore. But we could certainly look into it as an option and as a cost to see if it would be a.
The only gut reaction I had to the synthetic geofoam is, it's close to the river, it's a sensitive natural habitat, and putting that much of a synthetic material that we know can leach byproduct if the system fails, just raise some cautionary hairs, more than I think the price. And so then I was just wondering where the slate is the other lightweight.
Yeah, it's
Where does that come from?
expanded shale. It's not a manufactured product. It's basically crushed shale that has been put into a kiln and superheated.
Like perlite and vermiculite.
Exactly. And so what
Okay.
happens with that is it pops like popcorn, and it becomes half the weight, or if not more than less than half the weight. Sorry. So that definitely could be, like, again, another option instead of using the synthetic material of the geofoam. Going back to the culvert, Yankee Ingenuity type repair, the issue is the slope that we're on. So if you were to do culverts, you definitely wouldn't put the culvert all the way across the roadway, and you try to.
Taper
It would be hard to construct that, just because we're on a slope and the material that we have to remove, at the end, you'd almost have these culverts sticking out of the slope. So it's in a funny geometry for that type of system, but it's thinking outside the box. And so are there other outside the box solutions? I can tell you, if we did look at or try to engineer some sort of culvert repair, that would be the first in the state and probably first in the country. I've never heard of anybody trying to do that before. So maybe there's something there.
It might also qualify as a structure, is where I was trying to check that box.
Yeah, we'd have to confirm eligibility on that too, because if we determine that drainage isn't the underlying issue, but we put a structure in there, I do not know if we'd be eligible or not.
Yeah.
But I can check on that.
I guess my question is, what does our road commissioner think?
I don't really know, that's why
Oh.
I came to you guys. And where we are now is because I don't know how to stop it.
Okay.
And I just think it's a safety issue. It keeps happening. We did it a couple times and I thought, it's gonna stop. And it didn't.
If I'm not mistaken, Junior, there was another section of roadway in the town that you were able to do this type of solution, and it has held.
Yes. Yeah, but it was much smaller. And that was on Spear Street, just east of Guinea Road. There's still, if you drive over it now, you know it's on the blacktop, it's kind of, we dug that out and we put shale in there. That was, 10 years ago or so when we were still in the shale pit.
I guess the only other thought from an engineering standpoint would be, is there a way of using a concrete foundation to abut that 8 to 10 foot section and then bury that footing so that it retains what's inside it?
Let me see if I'm understanding that. So you're thinking building a concrete wall with a footing here and replacing this soil with a structure? Is that what you're?
Yeah, any type of fill that wouldn't be it would just maintain the mowability of the ditch, but the wall would be holding any further sloughing on both sides of the road.
Yeah.
It'd be it may be much more expensive. I mean, that's 300 feet of 10-foot concrete wall would be a pretty massive structure.
Yep. So you definitely get to unload the slope if we built something in there.
If we did construct that, I don't know, except for mowability, I don't know if backfilling it would be, I guess you could use some of the material that you took out to backfill that, because then it wouldn't have the weight above it. But I don't know if it would be beneficial to fill behind it as well on the downhill side beyond mowing, as well as if you have a wall that's 10 feet tall, you need guardrails and the works.
Right, that's right.
So we'd have to look into that as well. But definitely an option that we could look into further, depending on where your heads are at, and you know, repairs on, and we can also, you know, right now we have culverts, we have walls, geofoam, and lightwood fill. It's 4 alternatives that we can put together cost estimates for, and gather some more information, and maybe one we say, hey, this is a, you know, would apply or wouldn't apply for the structures grant, and we could take it a step further after that if you guys would like that. So.
Are gabions typically less than the soil? I don't know.
Yeah, gabion wall, it'd be about the same in weight as soil, just
Okay.
because you're filling
So you're
those
just be
wire
going side-
boxes with the stone, and so the wire box is just sort of containing the stone, but it's the same weight.
Yeah, so you'd be going sideways.
Yeah.
And Junior, could there be a catastrophic event that took the whole road down? I mean, I'm trying to you know, it clearly has to be fixed, right, from your perspective? Okay.
Yes.
And we need a very serious, excuse the pun, in-depth fix.
Well, that's what I'm thinking, you know, it's like when I came to the select board before originally about it, I said that we can keep doing like we've been doing and just fixing it every time. Like the experts are saying that it's just compounding it, making it worse every time we add to it. So usually when it drops and we add, it's about somewhere between foot to 2 foot of a drop.
And you could equate that to, you know, how many trucks, I can't remember what Gary said the last
I
time.
think it's like the last time it's like 3 tandem loads a time, 3 to 4 tandem loads.
So it's a
30
lot of
yards.
volume. It's a lot of volume that you put back on that slope, and every time you do it, it's gonna get worse. So meaning the frequency of the repair along this section, if we keep adding stone, will increase. So I would not expect a catastrophic failure, meaning one morning it's gonna be down 10 feet and down into the wetland area. But I do expect it to slowly creep over time. So right now, it's been 2 or 3 fills.
Are there driveways along that section?
Not that section, no.
So if you lowered the road bed 4 feet and your road just went in a dip, you'd be getting rid of a significant amount of weight.
Yep, so that would be a roadway thing, meaning you have to check slope angles and of whatnot going down and back up and sight distances, so that's a transportation engineering problem.
Yeah, we'd have the repair would, let's see how far we have on this survey. Basically, there are 2 driveways, 2 closest driveways here, and then another driveway a few hundred feet
Okay.
up on the west side.
So they're not right there, but you would be significantly increasing the slope of those driveways.
Yeah,
Okay.
and you'd probably be unpleasantly surprised with how little we could actually gain by dropping that based on the vertical curves we need, and also just the drainage. We have to rework all those ditches to make sure that all works. So I think, yeah, the road geometry, we might be able to get a foot or 2 out of it, but I don't think we.
That's not enough
4
weight
feet.
then.
Yeah,
Okay.
5 feet.
So moving forward, we would wait to hear back from you on cost estimates and eligibility.
Yep.
And we might bring this up in between then, just to see what people think. We kind of have been a little behind on time tonight, and really appreciate your in-depth study and explanation.
If we were gonna put a 10% contribution for a grant as a placeholder in a budget, would I wanna put 10,000, 100,000, 50,000? A dartboard number for a placeholder.
This is dartboard.
Okay,
Do not
perfectly
hold me to
clear,
this.
perfectly clear.
10%, you're probably, I don't know, anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000.
Okay.
We're probably expecting, depending on the repair, which is a huge range, $200,000 to $300,000.
Sure.
Is again, throwing
A dart, okay.
at a wall.
Speaking of cost, as much as it's helpful for them to come back, I start to wonder how many times, whether you want communications or whether you want a presentation in the future as far as the options.
I defer to.
I'd opt for just communications, because I think now we've had a visual understanding of the problem. So I don't think we need the visual each time. Just
And we also, when we provide cost estimates, we'll also provide a memo, just giving you an overview of, hey, this is the repair, here are the pros and cons, and some of the issues you might see, and honestly, the environmental effect of the poly blocks. So it was something that we'll do some more research on and just see. Again, when they're protected, they're great, but like you said, if one of those seams fail and you happen to have a gas tanker leak right there, there's going to be an issue. So again, the likelihood of that happening is slim to none, but yeah, just something to consider. So our cost estimates would come with some sort of memo.
I complain plastic's gonna last forever.
At least microplastic.
Crushed bottles.
So we just filled up with bottles.
Great. Any other questions or comments for us?
Do you know? Awesome. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Yep. Next agenda item, changing of the elected board of listers to a hired assessor to manage the grand list. Dean, do you want to?
I thought Betsy was going to be here.
Betsy's here, she just wanted to wait and,
Okay, let me go find her.
Louise, I think, is
Okay.
So, I'm not really sure. I warned it, where you guys warned it, and I wrote an article in the newspaper. Didn't title it, the editor titled that, but just so you know. And so I don't really know where we go from here.
No, thank you. I mean, this was very well done and appreciated.
So I think it was for anybody who's interested in
No, I
asking
mean,
any questions.
personally, I support doing what you suggest, going to a professional. I mean, not that you're not a professional, but I mean an assessor.
Yes.
I mean, it's
versus
just
a
too
board.
much to ask individuals to do this, so.
So the next step would be to put an article on the warning for town meeting, which we'll probably be starting to look at next week.
I don't know how everyone else feels, though.
Well,
I know you feel.
my unique position in knowing intimately the job by nature, that it's an awful lot to ask from a volunteer. It seems to be getting more and more detailed every year.
I just don't know. I mean, I'm not against it. I just don't know if there'd be somebody that might want to run for that position and maybe want to take it over.
They could always,
Do we want to, I mean, I'm just wondering if we want to leave the opportunity there, be able to leave the opportunity there. I don't know if that's within this process, if it can be, if the position can be left there to see if there's interest, or if it, you know, and if not, then an assessor or somebody could be assigned.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think that for the most part, a town person can certainly step up and interview for the job and has that opportunity. And you can, you know, keep it as a board of listers. But next year, after their 2021, I'll be gone and there may not be other people filling that position. And as long as you're willing to go have it vacant for a while until you figure out the best way to proceed, that's fine. I just didn't want to leave you left without anybody.
So
That's the issue.
So if nobody, so let's just put the scenario that nobody decided to run, and then we need to have somebody there.
Then you would be going through this process, but it would be, you know, the following year, I would assume, because you're already going through the March, you know.
In the meantime, we don't have anybody.
Right, right. So that's the only,
I didn't read up on the statute, but if no one runs in a town that doesn't have a charter for the Board of Listers
Right.
and it's vacant,
You
the
can
select
do
board,
both, yeah.
the select board can appoint at that point?
We can appoint
Or-
listers.
But from a town resident.
Right, that would be the restriction.
right, so, you know, you're limiting the pool quite a bit there. I mean,
And
again,
expertise.
I understand where you're coming from, and I would prefer, you know, it'd be great to have it so that the board's always full, but it's just
Right, if
not
you had
happening.
two really interested listers that you were working with already.
Right, I mean, you have to
might
have three
recommend.
people, and one that is certainly, you know, motivated to learn a lot of stuff. And it just doesn't seem like it's sustainable at this point. But, you know, and again, I'd be happy to finish out my term and then say, you know, good luck. I mean, honestly, I you know, but I'm just trying to be a little proactive here so that
I
you.
appreciate that.
So that's all, you know, because you know, I even talk to people like, you know, I'm not going to be in this forever, just, you know, to see, kind of test how it's going with town citizens, and yeah, you know, they're not, people
Another-
don't seem too excited about it, so.
Another thought is, if we did an advisory motion at town meeting to get a straw poll from the residents, of what they thought about this change, there was a pretty significant turnout for the 2020 November election cycle. So it could be put on as a decision point for November. And then, you know, that would still be ahead of the 2021
Yeah, you could see
vacancy.
how it was going with that too, I mean, that's.
Have you received feedback since the article?
I have, and I went in early just to see, and not a single peep from anybody, so, you know, and that was a pretty easy article to spot in the paper, I mean,
Yeah.
so. Again, you know, just something I wanted to share.
ballot is annual meeting on the statute. Halfway
I think I
down,
put the statute in your,
yeah, that's what in our packet, I'm reading about halfway down the
By
page.
ballot in an annual meeting to eliminate the office of lister. So you certainly probably want to, like you said, if you want to see how people are feeling about it, do that in November for sure, because I think otherwise you may have a high likelihood of a year of nobody really being there. And I don't think that's good for the town.
If we did the,
Oh,
if we did the informational in
November.
March, this upcoming meeting, then we, if it is indeed has to be the annual meeting, we couldn't vote on it until the following,
Following.
Of
So that's why I'm saying
2021.
November.
which would be
But it also says that the select board may appoint an assessor to perform the duties of a lister as set forth until the next annual meeting.
I think that, isn't that after the vote, though?
Notwithstanding any provisions of law to the contrary and except as provided by subsection B of this section, in the event the Board of Listers of a town falls below a majority and the select board is unable to find a person or persons to appoint as a lister or listers under the provisions, the select board may appoint an assessor to perform the duties of a lister as set forth in Title 32 until the next annual meeting.
Okay. Which, you know.
Which I'm just saying is,
Reactive.
Yeah, at least you
yeah,
have something, you have some
it'd be a
safety net.
fallback. I
Yeah.
mean, I agree with you being proactive.
But yeah,
I'm
the
saying that.
safety net is there, so.
Mary?
I don't think you want to leave yourself in the position where there's anything but a smooth flow from a Betsy to the next person that's coming in the office. Like, there would be nice to have a Betsy who is helping whoever, either it's a lister or an assessor, to transition into that position, because there's no way that you want to have either someone who's not knowledgeable or leave the office empty for a couple months while that's not going to work. That's not going to work for anything, because there's a lot that goes on in there, and there's sales, and there's current use, and it affects everything. It affects the taxes. You want to be ready for Betsy not being there without.
That's true, and if it is empty, then, like Mary says, yeah, then there's a lull going on, and I'm out of there, and now it's like, you know, then you're turning someone loose who may or may not
You
know.
can make a big mess if you have a lot of errors in your grand list.
I can't imagine.
So you need to make a decision thoughtfully, rather than saying, oh, we should wait and you know, for this and wait for that. It's really not a good thing to do.
So if we, as a select board, agree to this concept, we could vote on the concept and then put it, we don't need to put it to a town vote. Should we put it to a town vote?
It has to put to a town
It's
vote
got-
to eliminate the
Elected
elected positions.
And what's our drop dead date for this coming March?
It's going on the town ballot, so, I mean, it would be this January that you approve the
Mid-January
warrant.
at the latest.
warning.
Plenty of time.
You could, I mean, if there is a town person interested, you could still appoint them or hire them.
Right.
So it's not like saying the town person can't do it. It's saying if there's not a town person, then it allows you to expand your hiring.
And I do agree with Mary that thinking about that, like she pointed out, it would be much better transition, so.
I agree with that.
Well, it would be a transition,
It would be a transition,
as
exactly.
opposed to lack of one.
Yeah.
Okay, put it on the ballot. Put it down.
Okay.
So I guess that's it then, I'm done?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Betsy.
Thanks, Betsy.
Solar net metering agreements, reviewing the draft agreement.
I guess the good news is that tonight's not a night to make any decisions. So I wanted to just bring you up to speed with where things stand, particularly focusing on the library project. And if we have enough time, I can just briefly touch in on solar for the additional buildings and then the preferred sites work. As far as the library is concerned, the key things that we're waiting for are approval from the state fire marshal for the actual layout on the roof. And as of Friday, Green Lantern hadn't heard one way or another from the fire marshal. So, you know, the layout determines the capacity, the production, the allocation. So it doesn't affect the substance of the net metering agreement. It affects the numbers that go in a exhibit at the end of the agreement. So that's the first thing. The second thing we're waiting for is the net metering agreements itself. And the town attorney has done a quite extensive review of the draft that was provided by Green Lantern and is working directly with Green Lantern's attorney to finalize the document. There are two significant, I think Dean may want to weigh in on this, but two significant additions that the town attorney made. One was customer assignment, so the ability of the town to opt out of the net metering agreement. So that's been inserted using language that Green Lantern provided. Another issue that the town attorney inserted was the issue of decommissioning at the end of the panel's useful lifetime. Aside from that, a lot of the other comments were, relevant, but they weren't really, hugely significant in the same way that those two were. There's another legal matter that needs to be resolved, and that is that Green Lantern needs a easement or a lease on the library roof, so that in the event the roof needs repair and the panels have to come off, they're not producing as they were expected to. So Green Lantern's attorney is drafting that agreement. We haven't seen it as yet. When we do see it, then it would go to the town attorney and hopefully for the two of them to finalize it. A couple of other related matters. The savings analysis, the estimated savings of the Green Mountain Power bills for the library be about $750 a year. As I've mentioned, I haven't mentioned previously, but the town has a certificate of public good for the installation. That was from the application we made in late June. If we go ahead and sign the net metering agreements, that would need to be transferred to Green Lantern, and that's just a form to fill out. That's relatively routine. Let's see what else is in here. As we've mentioned previously, the town does have an option to purchase the solar system at the start of year 6, and I'd suggest that our focus, initial focus ought to be on the savings from the net metering agreement with Green Lantern owning it, and we have 5 years to figure out whether the town wants to buy it. And as we approach that decision, we'll have actually operating data on what the panels are producing and what the maintenance costs are and those sort of things. So it's important from an economic point of view for the town to have the option to purchase, because it's a good, at least in my judgment and others, it's a good investment for the town, but it's not something that we need to worry about for 5 years or so. So I think, one other thing I would say is that the town's discount of 12% is guaranteed by the terms of the net metering agreement. So even though Green Mountain Power's rates and also the value of the net metering credits changes over the course of the 25 years, that 12% discount is fixed, and that's written into the net metering agreement. So the town always receives that 12% discount. So I think on Thursday, we're meeting with the Library Board of Trustees to present the information we have about the project and to ask the Board of Trustees to, vote on supporting the project. And Jonathan is here. Should he wish to speak to that in any way? So I think I'll stop there. And questions that you have, I'd like to be able to address them this evening, or if I can't, then I will do the research, speak to Green Lantern and others, and gather the information for you for the 16th.
Okay.
And John, I want to thank you because I sent, and I copied all of you on it, I sent John a list of questions, and he was very gracious, and we spent an hour or so. Was it Sunday morning or Saturday morning?
Saturday.
Saturday morning. And we went, and you all have that list of questions that I had for him. And also, Dean and I also met with the town attorney today to discuss what his concerns were and where we're going to go from there. And I think where I am is the dollar savings are minuscule. They're $750 a year, which is 60-something dollars a month. Did you just do that math for me?
No, I said estimated.
Estimated, yeah. And that can vary depending on the blended, the statewide blended rate and the Green Mountain rate, and so we're, that's estimated. But what my overriding concern at this point is the risk that the town will assume by having these structures on the roof, and the necessary holes that will be made in the roof, and that's my overriding concern. If you looked at this, at least from this point, the financial savings are insignificant. So that means we're doing it for some other reason. And if that other reason is that the town wants and needs to make a statement about the value of solar to the town, well, then we have to say how much is that worth to us? Because we're going to take on, from my personal point of view, a great deal of risk by putting these physical structures on a roof. And, even if we get the decommissioning clause in there, the biggest risk we face is that either there will be a major technology shift, which can happen, or in the alternative that Green Lantern goes belly up. And I just think we need to be cognizant that this is what we're taking on. I'm not saying we shouldn't take on the risk, but that's what's really going on here. John, I don't want to, and I just really appreciate the work that the Energy Committee has done, but we got to be doing this for other than money.
Well, that was one of my questions, and looking at this, was if they go belly up, who owns the system? Does it become
Well, it's a bankruptcy asset.
ward of the court kind of deal?
Well, it's an asset in bankruptcy. Someone could buy it.
Could be given to somebody to whom we don't.
Well, they have the unilateral right to assign the system to anyone. Green Lantern does.
Another question was, did you consider whether warranties are extended? I mean, to an assignee? We don't know?
No, I mean, I just giving you my 2 cents worth here.
One section that I didn't quite understand, but if I read it right, was the exclusivity, which was section 9, paragraph B, which to me, reads like the town as being a customer can't enter into a group net metering with anybody else but Green Lantern. So if we wanted to put a solar system for the beach, we couldn't use anybody but Green Lantern, the way I read this.
Where are you?
Page 6.
Page 6?
Page 6, section 9, paragraph B. I don't find that clear, but that's the way I read that, as being the customer.
Is this the document that the town attorney marked up?
Yeah, but he didn't.
Got it, John,
okay.
you need it?
Yeah,
He didn't put any
He didn't
marks
change-
on that section.
He didn't change anything on that section.
And maybe I'm reading that wrong.
No. Well, unless that pertains only to the solar array on the library. And
Which, that should have been a correction if.
yeah, no, I agree with you.
What else did I have on this agreement?
Well, I'm just was trying to give you guys the big picture here.
Just one clarification. There aren't any holes going in the roof.
Oh, good.
The panels are clipped onto the standing seam. So from a solar point of view, a standing seam
Okay.
roof is perfect.
Okay.
I was wondering where we were at with legal fees to this point. You spent an hour with the lawyer, talking to the lawyer.
I haven't
You
talked
said-
to the lawyer at all.
Oh, okay. I
So
just
I
thought I
thought maybe
heard,
2 days
No,
in
it's
the
just-
process of talking.
Dean and I have.
I just heard an hour talking with the,
Well,
I just wondered where we
Dean
were
was
at
keeping
the
track of the
moment.
minutes on that one.
Yeah, I mean, we were there for about half an hour.
We had another solar issue we had to discuss with him too.
Where are we at this point with
The total.
legal fees?
Legal, I'd have to
Just
look,
to
yeah.
get to
I'd
this
have-
point today?
I haven't broken it out, until the next bill comes, I don't know.
And another liability issue that we didn't mention is, or is possible, is changes to the net metering rules.
Well, my experience is that is a risk.
Well, I know it is, because I put panels on my barn 9 years ago, and were paying me cash, but then they said, well, we're not going to do that anymore. So
The rates can change.
the rates can change,
the
how they
technology
pay
can
them can change. I mean, from the standpoint of owning a system on your building, if it's not going to leak and you ultimately own it, you're not paying bills to anybody anymore if it covers your costs, so who cares, unless they change net metering rules. They want you, sooner or later, someone's going to have to start maintaining the grid besides the petroleum power people. I mean, there's nothing in the solar things that help pay for the maintenance of the poles and stuff. But within less than 9 years is when I put the panels on, and already the rules have changed once.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more. My experience is, and will be the first to raise my hand and say I have made some bad mistakes making assumptions about technology not changing. And what I want to do is make sure that we understand what we're doing here.
And why we're
it's very
doing it.
marginal.
And why we're doing it. Yeah.
And why we're doing it.
On the other hand, the benefits of current technology are pretty straightforward and well understood and have value. So if you're always waiting for the next technology, you'll never do anything, because whenever you're making a decision, there'll be something better coming down the line. So
No, that's fair. That's fair. But
How much of the roof gets covered, John? I've forgotten.
well, it's a good amount of the roof. It's the upper slope of the west roof, it's in two slopes, and it's part of the two south-facing dormers, the one on the existing library and then the one that'll go on the addition. So it's a good
So we're
part
gonna
of
put
it.
a metal roof on the addition, and then we're gonna cover it up with solar panels?
Yep,
Oh,
make it even more beautiful.
why is that?
Protect it from snow.
Well, see, I have neighbors that don't like the glare, and I've had 2 phone calls.
I drove to the store this morning, saw the solar farm panels were completely flat. I'd seen that in a long time, just flat as flat could be.
Robert?
It doesn't seem to be enough benefit from this project to even move forward and pass this meeting. I mean, $750 and you're gonna own if they go bankrupt. A lot of them do, the solar people that are putting them in now. We're not gonna get much out of this.
well, their business model, Bobby, I'm not sure I completely understand Green Lantern's business model, but it has to do with the investment tax credits and the sale of those investment tax credits, and how long those tax credits are good for, and whether there's accelerated depreciation involved in the investment itself. And I don't know the answer to that, but that's how they're making their money. And nothing wrong with it. I mean, that's a very legitimate business model.
My understanding is that the value of the tax credits and the accelerated depreciation is taken over the 5 years.
Yeah, that's why
That's why what's really common in these is for a buyout option in year 6.
Because they have maximized their
Yeah,
return at that point,
they've
exactly.
extracted the value that they can from it.
Do you know what percent of, I don't know offhand, and I don't have my, my town meeting book, but do you know what percent of the library's energy bill is going to be offset by this? Is it 90%?
The library will be entirely heated and cooled by electricity with the heat pumps. And the expectation is that, if the fire marshal agrees with the proposed layout, there'll be sufficient electricity generated by the solar panels to cover the load of the building. And there may even be a bit extra which would, need to be applied to another town meter. But we don't exactly know that yet. We're waiting to see what the layout is.
And obviously, the library doesn't use the energy. That is all,
The grid tie system.
it's sent directly to the grid. So if we bought it, that's one thing, we could think about is, do we actually want to try and use the energy, which would require the installation of
Switches.
well, a lot of things, including batteries. But that's way down the road if that's,
The one thing that's worth keeping in mind is that when we first looked at the bids that came in for library addition, and, you know, we had solar on there, $100,000, right? And that got removed, and then we've gone through this process, and if we approve this net metering agreement, the town gets library on the roof for an upfront cost of $0, or the town's legal fees. So you get all of the benefits of having solar on the roof without having to put any money up front. And then if the town decides after 5 years that it wants to invest in the panels, you know, the price at that point is around $50,000. It gets determined by either an appraisal or by the present value of the system based on, you know, how well it's performed. So I guess now that I think, while I was bothered that solar got taken out initially, I think this is a better way to go for the town, at least financially.
Did, slightly a different direction, do we know the efficiency of the panels that Green Lantern is proposing versus where they show up on the market? Are they mid-performing? Are they top-performing?
Yeah, I can confirm that. I think from talking with Lease and the consultant who reviewed the proposals, both Green Lantern and Norwich Solar proposed the same panels, except the only difference was the output. And Green Lantern were going with 390 watt panels, which are just a little bit more efficient than 385s, which the other company specified. But I can get the information on the efficiency.
Just for me, I mean, what are the best ones out there in terms of watts per square foot, I guess would be the calculation.
I'll find that out for you.
Output. That was a decision when I've done 2 of these, one on my house in California and one here. And that was a option in the thing. If you want the more efficient ones, they cost more.
Yep. So the 390s are more expensive than the 385s.
I don't even know what mine are. I'm sure they're not near that anymore.
The other kind of wrinkle in all of this is that the renewable energy credits are owned by Green Mountain, and they will sell those in the market. And so any claim that the town has that it's actually producing is really a sham.
Well, you know,
that's too harsh of a word, John. Correct me.
Well, you know, there's a lot of controversy around that, and there's a lot of different opinions. And I'm not an authority on it, but Green Mountain Power, in a statement that they sent around recently, they said that as of 2017, renewable energy credits produced by small-scale solar are retired.
Oh, okay.
And if that's the case, if they retire them, then
You're right.
You know, that argument goes away. What we can say is that solar, if we go ahead and put solar on the library roof, it will be helping Green Mountain Power meet their renewable energy standards and helping the state get to 90% renewable by 2050. So you can say that, you know, these panels are doing their part in supporting the state's renewable energy goals.
Robert? Up there where it says the town makes monthly payments to Green Lantern for the net metering credits. The next line down is the term of net metering agreement is 25 years. If the town does not exercise its purchase option, are we paying them?
Yes.
Yes.
Pay them 88% of the renewable credits that we get.
How much is that?
Well, the net, oh, go ahead, John.
The way that it works is that the solar generates what are called net metering credits.
Yep.
They get posted to the Green Mountain Power, the library's Green Mountain Power bill. And so those credits offset Green Mountain's charges. And at the end of the year, you know, you end up with a small amount to pay because the net metering credits are by and large taking care of the electricity consumption for the library. And the town, instead of paying a regular utility bill to Green Mountain
John,
Power.
can I interrupt you right now?
Beg your pardon?
Can I interrupt? The $750 a year, and we're putting heat pumps in there, our power bill is gonna go up.
That's right. But if you look, well, let me just finish what I was saying, is there's 12% discount on between the value of the net metering credits that are applied to the Green Mountain Power bill and what the town pays Green Lantern. So that's what generates the $750 savings. It's true that the town's electricity bill will go up a lot, but the town's oil bill will go to zero.
The what bill?
The oil bill.
Heating.
Yeah, right, will go to zero. And I did actually start to look at what the net economic impact would be, and, you know, that horse has left the barn, but economically, it's a good decision to go to the heat pumps because they're so efficient.
But John, no one that has a heat pump in cold weather in Vermont doesn't have to have other heat to supplement. Unless you're gonna wear your parka.
Beg your pardon?
Unless you're gonna wear heavy jackets all the time.
Well, we'll find out, you know.
There's what I don't want to find out.
I'll jump in here and say that I've talked to some people that have had cold weather heat pumps for 2 years, and they have not had a problem with needing auxiliary heat. They have not. And one of the keys to that was, in discussing with one person, is that people typically turn the thermostat down at night thinking they're saving money. But when your heat pump is running, when it's really cold out, and it has to catch up in the morning, it doesn't do it very well because it's running at the very edge of its efficiency. So when it's really cold with the heat pump and you want to keep your room comfortable, you don't mess with the thermostat. You leave it set and it's got enough juice to keep it there, but if you turn it down, it doesn't have enough juice to bring it up quickly in the morning. You can wait till dinner time before you're comfortable again, and then you automatically goes down. So
That's what the wood stove is for.
well, yeah, we don't have one of those over there. We could burn the books, but they don't like that.
So I got a number of questions here that came up in the conversation, and we'll address those between now and the 16th. And we'll have to keep things open in terms of what's on the agenda on the 16th, because it depends on, you know, this legal review and on, you know, the town attorney and the Green Lantern attorney reaching agreement. And that also depend on, you know, the answers that we come up with related to your questions. So just, if I could just have 2 minutes to talk about the other projects.
Yes,
the additional solar, which would be supplying Town Hall, the Senior Center, Thompson's Point, and Fire and Rescue. I'm going to be meeting with Fritz and Tom at Fire and Rescue on Thursday to talk about Fire and Rescue's possible participation in that. Green Lantern has gained access to the town's Green Mountain Power bills. Thanks for that. And they've done the analysis. I'm just checking their work. So we've got, you know, we'll have good estimates of the savings for the town buildings. The net metering agreement for the town buildings is very, very similar to the one for the library. So in terms, it will need, you know, a review, but it's nowhere near as extensive because a lot of the provisions are in common between the two net metering agreements. But there's also not a time crunch on that net metering agreement in the way that the library one is. The library one really needs to be done by the end of the year. Anything that we do for the town buildings can wait a while. So, you know.
So John, we owe a decision on the 16th.
Beg your pardon?
We owe, I'm sorry, we owe you guys a decision on the 16th.
If we can.
Yeah, well, I mean, because.
If the documents are ready.
If the documents are
Legally.
ready, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, because I know you, I know with the tax credits go from 30% to 26% next year.
Right.
And
Okay.
we've carved out an hour.
Over what,
Okay.
what was it? What does it go?
30 to 26.
Then the final thing, just on the preferred sites analysis, so that's something that, you know, needs a lot more thought, and from the town's point of view, it's a new revenue source from leasing land for solar and from property tax revenues. So I've asked Green Lantern to just give us their thoughts on what sort of that arrangement might look like. And, you know, we have plenty of time for that, and time to really think about and see if it's something we want to do. If they did it, it wouldn't cost anything, whereas the work itself would otherwise cost about $11,000. So,
And they won't look at farmland, will they? Where a hay could be made, or?
The
Soybeans.
idea of being a preferred site, it would just be on town-owned parcels. And the idea of identifying preferred sites is to look at the town owns 14 parcels. There's about 7 that look more promising than the other 7. But the idea of doing the analysis is to identify desirable parcels and undesirable parcels, and prime farmland is not desirable.
Wasn't some of that done in the,
Town plan.
the town, yeah, the revision of the town plan? There was a map?
That's where the language comes from. But the maps are in there, but they need to be, they're not good enough for the purpose of the legislation.
Someone needs to walk the land and evaluate.
Yeah.
And that was done for the entire town.
Well, this analysis would be done
Just
for
for
the
town-owned.
town-owned parcels.
Right, whereas
So you
that
could
was
look at
done
that
for the whole
map
town.
and determine that actually of all those parcels that are ideal sites, there may only be 2 of them that are town-owned. So that may, if you're down to 1 or 2 sites, the $11,000 might be subject to change.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it, John. Public comment? Okay,
I think we have a wonderful public.
that's a
My
good
public
comment. I like that. The budget review. Mary's here. Thank you for waiting.
Oh, I didn't get that out of my box, did I?
So, there's a lot of numbers here, and I'm hoping that you read it, because I'm not intending to go through every single one of them. Just maybe hit the ones that have significant change that is agreeable to you all.
Yes.
So do you have this handwritten one? In the revenues, the only one that's, well, there's 2. One is under town clerk's fees, the recording fees. I've increased it to 60,000 from 40, and that is a result of the state changing the fees for the clerks. And the other increase in the revenues is in the interest income. So estimating 9,000, which is different than $350. So it's a little hard to estimate that the first time around here, because we're divvying up the interest between the special funds and the general fund, since they all reside in the same bank account. But I'm going to go with 9,000.
Can I ask you,
Yeah.
hang on here, special investigations, it's on, what would be page 3, item 10, on the donation section, Mary.
It's not really a donation.
It's not.
That's why I'm asking, yeah.
It's not. It shouldn't really be there.
It's, I can't remember the acronym, QZ.
Yep.
The unit for special investigation.
Each town pays
it's-
into it.
Oh, okay.
So it's a
not-
county
we
task
first put it
force,
in its own
and they
expense line,
And
then
we
we put it in
divvy up
donations
their
for some
budget
reason, which is
that's
and
our
make a
share of it.
request to the
And
town.
what do special investigations do? And I don't want to...
Mostly child sexual,
Child investigation.
Okay, so that's our share of it. Okay.
So that
And
line
shouldn't
really
we
should be
put
moved
this
out
on
of
our own?
donations.
Yeah.
some towns
That
contribute
line
police.
should be moved out of
Okay.
donations, because it is not a donation.
Okay.
So I can move that if you
Well,
so
just
desire.
curious.
Is there anything else on this list?
On the
that's
first
not a
page under
donation?
revenues, there's nothing there that's significantly outstanding.
The ag lease is gonna go up?
The ag lease are going down. Because you decreased the Thompson's Point ag lease from 2,500 to 450.
Man, we didn't just make it up tonight?
I don't know what you did tonight.
We got a lot.
Yeah,
Anyone from the park still here?
This was like 4,000.
1,400 each year, 7,000 on it.
1,400 more?
For what, the park? So what's the total? Currently, it's at 3390.
It's like 40,
How much?
4,402.
4,402?
Yep.
So that's just about $1,000 more, so the ag lease revenue could be in the range, would be more in the range of 5485, if it's not exact, but just by what you said. So that will be, we can adjust that. The second page is expenses, and the new thing there is the request for a part-time assistant. Very part-time, thinking, I budgeted it at 15 hours a week. So basically that is, there's a little bit more work than, for two people. And it's especially hard when somebody is out or on vacation. And the other thing is that if something were to change, you would at least have that part-time person who knew something and could, if they wanted to, move into a full-time position if all of a sudden you found yourself missing someone. So it's future planning as well. The other increase in our expenses is under service contracts, and that is as a result of a letter we received from NEMREC. We have an annual support contract with them and also disaster recovery contract. And they increased the annual support contract $5,000 to $5,000 as a result of things they had to put in place for cybersecurity safeguards and new people that they had to hire because of that. So they have not increased our annual contracts in, I'm not sure how many years. A lot.
This is NEMRC.
NEMREC. So for next year, they'll be in the 5,700 range for both of those two annual contracts, and that is an increase from a little over 2,000. Everything else in there is basically the same. So I don't know if you guys have any questions. On the last page, under expenses for town hall, I have nothing in the equipment line, and I kind of leave that up to you guys to, if there's something out there that I don't know about.
Okay. New computers.
We're buying those this year,
Okay, fair enough.
apparently.
Dean, did I see that its estimate is $30,000
I hope not.
to accommodate the new computers? Did I misread that?
Yep.
I thought it was
Yeah, it's not right.
8,000 or something
Yeah,
for
it's-
5 computers.
No, that's the computers. I read, and I won't take any more time, I'll talk to you later about it. There was something in our packet that talked about up to $30,000. Yeah, here it is. It's from, well, it's from you, from Steve Williams.
Oh, that's Thompson's Point?
Oh, is that Thompson's Point?
That just today?
Because we said this, well, here, I don't want to take up.
Yep. Yep, it's today. Thompson's Point.
Thompson's Point wastewater budget is not our budget.
Yeah. It'll be tomorrow.
Sorry.
Tomorrow, 4 o'clock.
Okay.
I don't know, there's nothing really crazy here. I put the library bond in under the debt service line at $44,400, and that's right from our amortization schedule. We typically transfer funds into the clerk's record restoration fund, but I have that at zero because we don't really have any projects out there, and we have plenty of money in our reserve fund. So, I don't know.
Mary, are there any other, on this list for donations that should be on a separate line, or the rest of them are all?
Those are all donations.
Those are all donations. Okay.
Question, Julianne?
If I could ask Mary, so you put in the library bond for November 2020. The other bond for the ambulance, is that in 2021?
The ambulance, the fire and rescue bonds are paid out of the fire and rescue capital budget.
Okay, so it's a separate.
Yep.
Okay, thank you for that.
Am I good?
Yes. Thank you.
Really good?
Good. Thank you. Charlotte Volunteer Fire and Rescue.
Good evening, everyone. How are you all?
Good, you?
Okay.
Thanks for waiting.
So here we are again, a month later. The numbers that we presented to you in the preliminary budget have not been modified. We had a members meeting the second week in November, and the members accepted the budget as presented. If you need me to review what's included in the budget as far as personnel, remind you that we run 28 shifts a week. We did a market adjustment back in March, so that is reflected in the budget that's in front of you. The average increase to bring our EMS per diem staff in line with the rest of District 3 was on average $3 an hour. Right now, the average wage for our EMS personnel is under $19, and that includes your medics and your advanced AEMTs as well. So there's still, if we're looking at aligning them to what market rate really is, there'd be a significant increase to the budget. Every dollar of payroll increase for those folks ends up relating to an additional $16,360 to our budget for every dollar.
Right.
And that would be burdened. That is burdened, not unburdened.
So again, from a big picture standpoint, if you look at the increase in appropriation, which is 84,000, basically 90% of that is payroll related.
How many more will you need besides what we have on paper?
We
We're
don't
gonna
need to,
add more
we don't need
2
to
years
increase
from
any
now.
additional people. So
Will you
number of
need a bigger
personnel we
staff?
wouldn't be adding, but if we were doing another market adjustment, every dollar in market adjustment
It's 16
would be
grand.
the $16,000.
But
So-
you won't need your staff to be bigger 2 years from now.
No, because we only
This
have
is-
28 shifts. There'll still
Uh-huh.
only be 28 shifts. We run two-person crews, 12-hour shifts. That requires 4 people per day. 4 times 7 is 28.
So we're obviously at our max by
Right.
having that.
So I guess a better way to answer your question, Carrie, is that we do not anticipate as an organization to run 2 ambulances or staff 2 ambulances simultaneously. We're going to continue running 1 ambulance staffed with 2 paid personnel and supplement that with volunteers when they're available. Does that answer your question better? Okay.
I didn't know if it's going to be a 10-member department
No.
someday. Is that what you're?
I lobbied for a pastry chef.
The one thing that could potentially have an impact on this is Heinsberg. And we had a good meeting with their town administrator and a member of their, I'm trying to think who the other individual was, from their ambulance committee. And we've gathered probably about 90% of the information that we think we need in order to be able to make some kind of an offer, if you will, to Heinsberg. Obviously with, discussion with this board in advance. But it has the potential to, offset or increase the patient billing in a meaningful way. So, to be determined.
Meaningful, but not double what you're currently saying.
Right.
Instead of them getting an ambulance. Instead of Heinsberg getting their own ambulance.
They're
That's
still
what your
vetting their
discussion was.
process and going through the motions. I think they have come to the realization that the timeline to be ready, fully staffed, and with an ambulance come July 1st is unrealistic for them.
Yeah.
Maybe a year later.
So you would still run 1 ambulance if you
Mhm.
got that contract?
Yep. We've looked at our run rates and our turnaround times and all the other metrics, and the increased volume that we would see based upon only doing a portion of Heinsberg, because Richmond is also looking at doing that section of town that's closest to their border, would not negatively impact.
Questions?
Yeah, I had 2 questions about the capital reserve fund. Looking at the big ones in 21, 22, and 23, 24. I was just looking at the useful life and the actuals. So we replaced the 1980 pumper in FY19. That was 39 years old.
Yep.
No one's saying that that was responsible, or that 1980 pumper was doing the town much service for 5 to 10 years, but that was 19 years past its useful life. And then the ambulance 2006 was replaced in FY20. That's 14 years for a 10-year life.
And there was,
Significant maintenance costs.
right,
you
but that
know.
was a conscious decision on behalf of the organization too, that they felt that the replacement, was it R4, R3? What's the most recent fire apparatus that we got? Engine 2?
Engine 2 replaced the old engine 2.
Right, so that had a higher priority to be replaced, so we actually flipped them on the capital replacement plan.
Got it. And then the 93 tanker,
Has a 30-year life, and that's why it's slated for 22.
that's a 29-year, right?
So you actually want
So
to
if
go
we-
out and do the bond so that,
Pushing it to the 30-year would be 22, 23.
Right, but you actually need to place the order today. The build cycle is almost a year for any of these apparatus, so that's why you want to budget, bond for it in year 29, 19, 14 if it's a 15-year life, so that way it's in service the year later.
But it wouldn't be out of service in that if we push that out a year, it would just incur a maintenance cost,
Right.
an incremental maintenance cost.
Extra-
I mean,
extra,
this is sort of
incremental.
because what I'm looking at is, and then 2 years down the road, placing the 2004 with a 2024, that's another 20 years. But when we look at the solvency of the fund and the increase in budget request, if those weren't in opposing directions, I wouldn't look to see what the savings would be by extending a purchase a year. But I think that would be significant as far as the increase of the input into the capital fund and its solvency.
I would actually defer to Fire and Rescue's engineer, who actually happens to be sitting up at the table. He's more familiar with both of those pieces of apparatus than I am. I do know that this year,
Blow-by-blow description. For example, the old engine 2, the pump was on its last gasp. To make it extended another year, you're looking at a $10,000-$15,000 pump replacement. Okay, throw it out. For example, the tanker is not so critical on the pump. It's a less complicated piece of equipment. So the evaluation can be made probably closer to the buy date as to, well, there's always the motor blows up kind of possibility. But, I mean, most of these things we keep an eye on. Some equipment is more evolved with others, so as to extending the rate, the livelihood needs to be kind of like a...
And weighed against the bond payments are anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000.
A year, right.
A year.
So, I mean,
extending
I think
that versus 10.
when it comes up to that position, I think that so far the staff, the department's been pretty good at looking, well, we can milk this one another year. I don't think.
Yeah, 39-year service, they definitely, doing an exceptional job at keeping it on.
And it also depends on how critical that piece of equipment is, like the ambulance or versus your second tanker. If you go to a fire and there's 2 other people coming, you might not miss the tanker as much as you would showing up with the one ambulance if it's dead. I think that's probably the most critical piece of equipment.
Right, that the service doesn't suffer for...
Yeah, for the ambulances. But I think if you like, I could probably sit down with the chief and we could come up with take another look at, or think about extending life estimates on that.
On the 93?
I think they're mostly placeholders for your capital planning. When it comes down to, do we need this next year? Can you make it work another year?
Right.
I think then it's appropriate to have the discussion and to sit down and look at that particular piece of equipment critically.
Case by case.
Yeah, case by case.
Yeah, and I think the most pertinent one would be to just look into the 93 tanker. And, that's only a year out, or a budget cycle out. It's 2 years, but...
You also have to think about, inflation on the purchase price of delaying a year as well, right? Factor that into the equation, so.
Yeah.
Other questions on operating or capital reserve?
No, I think also just the last thing on capital reserve is when I first came to the board, this 10-year window has been moving. So the luxury I had 6 years ago looking in the past is, the town had level funded this capital reserve fund $180,000 a year.
Right.
And so there were significant cuts, and we're in a process of bringing it back up to a sustainable contribution, annual contribution.
Right.
But as far as the other board members, that's kind of the evolution in the 6 years I've been on the board.
One of the conversations that I had via email, because I was in Boston most of last week with Dean, was that we should be cognizant of the fact that we offset the revenue stream a year later than the approval of the purchase of a new piece of apparatus. So in other words, we can't sell the current ambulance and you see that revenue stream the same year that we actually purchased the ambulance because of the build cycle. So we'll be receiving the ambulance that was approved last March will be arriving May of 2020. So it will easily, by the time it's in service, everything is checked out. It'll be FY21 before we're even able to post that for sale and see that revenue stream. So Dean has those numbers to put out as well. So the same thing would hold true in the 21-22 cycle. That $5,000 for the sale of old vehicles and apparatus, that $5,000 should switch to the 22-23 year on this schedule.
Back to operating just for a second. You know, one thing just to be clear about, one of the key assumptions is that in that budget is that we're providing 9 medic shifts per week, and that's kind of an aspirational goal, and we have not consistently been able to do that. So the thought is if we have those 3 permanent part-time positions, maybe we make at least one of those at the paramedic level as opposed to AEMT or EMT. But it's also conceivable that if we don't hit, if we're not paying out at a 9 shift per week rate, that we come in at the end of the year at, having paid out less than we'd expected in payroll. So it's just a challenge. Filling the shifts is a real challenge every month. So.
Anything else? So I'll finalize all of the information. I'll get Dean the submission for the town report. I'm assuming that this is the budget we're going forward with for FY21.
And we will keep you posted on Heinsberg for sure.
Please, that'd be great.
And I think if we were going to have that conversation with you, it would have to be closed door because it would be contract negotiations.
I think that there's provision for that statute. I think the only thing is we may still look at the capital reserve fund.
But as far as the operating budget, I'll assume that this is what I'll send you for the...
Do people have any?
Rescue is a pretty big budget.
It can always be amended at town meeting. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Choice, right?
Yeah,
Did you want the ambulance to go out or not?
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it. Road Commissioner, Junior, thank you for waiting. We're catching up.
Okay, great.
15 minutes behind.
Oh.
Thank you.
So I think I put one in the packet based on a misunderstanding, so this is the
Pretty
actual.
much everything is level funded, but I think the only thing that we might want to add in there would be the Moncton Road. Whether it's the 10% or whether we don't get a grant at all. I think we don't know if we're going to even get the grant, so I think it's up to you guys to kind of decide, what we should do about it. We can, if we don't get a grant, we can keep repairing it like we have.
Can you repair it with the grader without adding material?
Can you what?
Can you repair it just by lowering the road and shaving material so that you're not adding more weight, but still filling in the annual slough, just
Well,
like for
if
next
we-
year, not long-term?
If we did that, what we're gonna do is if we scrape off the existing road and put some of that into the part that is dropped off, then
You're still at it.
we're gonna run right into our shale.
You're still at it.
Right.
But you're still,
Pretty soon.
you're just.
Oh, right, that is still getting the weight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
still getting-
It's not the weight on the road that's pushing us slough.
It's
It's
putting
the
us,
weight on the
it's,
slide.
the road itself is staying, it's kind of the edge of the road, so every time we put material, whether it is gravel we take off the road, stone, whatever we put over there for weight, they're saying is increasing its,
You almost need Japanese knotweed, which has a 10-foot deep root system. It might be the only benefit to it. That was just for the invasive.
Either that or we can take all the ash trees that we cut down and throw them over the side to hold it up.
Yeah,
That's probably what happened 30 years
that would
ago.
fix that carbon, yeah. So, yeah, no silver bullet.
You like that one, didn't you?
so, you know, I'm not sure.
Jane, what is your recommendation that we put in here for the Moncton Road? It's just would be a guess.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it would depend on if we were able to get a grant or not. You
Which
know, if
path?
we would get a grant, then I would say probably 20 to 30,000.
I would at minimum put the placeholder for the grant, 25
Yeah,
to 30,000.
But that
I
could
think we
go
need
in the
to, right?
reserve fund, not the operating. I mean, that could,
It
there's
could go
a,
into reserve.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't everything unspent go into reserve automatically
It does.
from your budget?
Yes, it does.
It's
But
there's-
we don't have hardly anything in there because of 2 years ago, I decided to use the reserve
Right.
to do 2 pavings to get us on, so our paving would now be done in the spring early instead of being done in October, so.
Yeah.
So I
That
burned
never,
up all of my, and then with the overage we had that 1 year with Pike.
and that reserve fund built up over how many years to get it up to that?
I'm not sure, because at first, the reserve, I wasn't getting the reserve. It went back to the general fund, and Mary Mead was the one that said that it
Stays.
could stay in, it should stay in the highway, that's, so anyway, she was the one, but I don't know the year.
Got it.
I'm gonna say maybe as long as 10 years.
Maybe to put the
8 to 10
25 or
years.
30,000 into the reserve fund to give it a boost and for a placeholder for this project.
Yeah.
But
There's-
the other thing is, you know, anything that is going into the reserve, this is kind of like looking into the future. I think it should be put aside for a sand salt shed, which, you know, we're using the spot down there. We mix the sand and the salt, and the salt is going into the swamp, okay? It runs out of the sand every time you get a rain. So over the years, it's going there. So like, at one time, they said we needed to put in a salt shed, and now the state, and then they said we didn't. So I just think in the future, that's something we should be looking at. I mean, because that spot is probably the worst spot to have a sand pile, because it's on the west side of Pease Mountain. So it gets no sun until afternoon, and we have a lot of problems with frozen chunks because we get the rain like this, so the salt that we have put in it goes down in, and then it freezes, and then as we dig into it, the chunks come down, and then we play around with trying to get the chunks out and break them up. So I think that we should be looking at that. I'm not saying in the next year, and I say the spot to put it is the flea market. Of course, that's up to, you know, the town in general, but I don't want you guys to, not just you, the board in general, whoever's on the board, to do something with the flea market without looking into the future and saying that, hey, at some point, we might have to put up a town garage, town salt sand shed.
We might have a regular town highway department, we don't know,
Correct.
we might end
That's
up
what I
that way
mean.
sometime, so. It's good to look into the future.
Yeah.
Is there not room for a salt shed where the sand pile is now?
Well, I don't know how much, it's just the root road that we are on. So how much of a right away we actually have there.
Got it.
I don't believe it's very
For a
wide.
building,
For
yeah.
a building. I mean, you probably could put one in there, like where the sand pile is, and just maybe extend it a little bit more, maybe to the south.
I go to Barrett's quite a bit,
Yeah.
and their shed is basically those concrete blocks
Yeah.
with a small roof system on top
Correct.
of just trusses.
And that's-
Is it something that simple you're talking about,
Yeah.
or is it like
But
the
I
ones
mean,
I see
that's
on the interstate where they're like those funny domes with the, with the kind of, you can drive the trucks inside them type salt shed?
Well, you can drive inside Barrett's.
Yeah, the loader goes in, yeah.
Huh?
Oh, look.
Loaded, yeah,
Yeah.
and dump in there. Yeah, it would be something that size, I mean, with blocks, I think it's something like,
I
Town of
think it's- I
Ferrisburg
think-
has one, they're
I think you're
probably,
talking more location than the salt shed itself.
a what?
The location, the way the location is, rather than the salt shed itself, just the
Yeah, well,
location.
the location, if we were to go and put a salt/sand shed where the existing is, and it had a cover over it, the location wouldn't bother it if we have the room. What bothers it now is we don't get the sun because of the Peace Mountain there.
Right.
But if it had a cover over it, we would, every time it rained,
You'd keep your salt.
it would, yeah, we'll keep the salt, keep the sand. Most of the towns are not using any salt in their
Sand mix?
sand mix because of it being in the pile. They might put it in a salt shed and then just throw a little bit on top, just to keep the top. And it never gets any moisture on it to make the salt disappear.
Yeah,
So it's something to think about.
as far as the reserve fund goes.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
But again, if you're talking the future, there may be a need, like I said, for a town highway department, there may be a need for a maintenance garage there, and also
Correct.
and there's no room there
Not there.
to have a salt shed and any kind of building for maintenance or anything else.
Because you do all that in your garage on Churchill.
Correct, yeah. The only thing that's down here is just the loader and then signs.
What, Jeff
And
used
salt.
his place when he was road
No,
commissioner?
Jeff used that place.
And that was where he did his maintenance also?
I would say, yes. But,
And that was it.
But it-
Before that it was Henry
yeah.
and he was
Correct,
Churchill
yeah.
also.
Could be,
Yeah.
I don't know, Jeff worked out of a lot of places.
well, yeah, I'm not
It's on
sure just
Palmer,
where he
or the
worked
other
out of.
farm.
He
I
was on a
mean,
farm up here on Route 7,
Right.
but he also had other places that he used to go to.
he has a
trucks
shop
fixed.
over on Carpenter Road at his parents' old
Yes.
place.
Oh, yeah,
There's
at the
yeah,
bottom there.
there's Bottom of the hill there, but I don't think they're really working out of it now.
I think they sold the
And the
house.
other thing was when he was there, he didn't have very much of a sand pile there because he had the sand pile over in Sheehan's bunker where Steve Denton is now.
Huh.
So he had sand piled over there.
Stockpiled there for that side
Stockpiled
of
there
town.
in that bunker there.
And he split it.
Correct, yeah. So, time you have the trucks, and stuff down there, there's not very much room. There's probably only about, I don't know, 75 feet wide or something, that whole
Stretch.
area, if that, and then it's just the length of it.
Do you know how many yards that pile is?
Roughly 4,000 yards,
It is?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
So people want to do 25 or 30 for the reserve fund?
I think we should do 30.
30?
I'd rather be safe than sorry. It's not like we're gonna go and spend it.
Right.
And it,
Yeah,
it
no,
would
I
be
think
there.
30
But I think
is
it's up to you. We don't know what it's gonna cost. I think it depends on what they come back with.
Yeah, I think 30 will be good. That'll do, the 20 to 25 that we might need for the bond and get ahead on anything else for major in the future.
Or it could be taken out too,
Yeah.
Could be taken out
But it
and put
could
back
be-
to the general fund.
Oh,
If
right.
we only use
And-
15 of it, I
Or
don't
we just-
know, I'm okay with it going back. I just think that we should plan ahead. I haven't increased my budget in like 10 years, so it's like, I don't really want to say, hey, I can take 15 out of my budget. You know,
No,
I've already
you've had the most.
taken for the, you know, for the Du Bois and King, just for their study there, I've already taken, what was the bill, like $5,000, I think? So I've already taken that out of my working budget. So it's like, I don't really want to take any more out.
Yeah, you probably have the most, the least increase in budget of any department, and you have the biggest department, so
Yeah.
it's impressive.
Yeah, you know, and I try to stay in budget and have some left over in case we need it in the spring or for something that comes up. But I'm not gonna say we're gonna be able to keep doing that.
Looks good.
Dean?
So just to be clear, Junior verbally said he's going to keep the budget the same. I put in what was in last year's budget, but he had, I think last year was added the $20,000 for brush and.
That was for actually the emerald ash tree borers, and which I really didn't want in mine. I wanted to stay in Mark's.
So just for the news, to be clear, Junior's proposed budget is 903,250.
903,250.
Yeah.
So same as 2019 level funded.
Yeah, 2018, 2019, yes.
And now we're gonna add 30 to that.
No, we're doing,
Oh.
and also there's two reserve funds. One is the reserve fund that the highway budget gets rolled into, and then there's also a highway capital reserve fund. And the capital is what is used for projects like this. So it's not coming out of the highway reserve fund, which Junior has control over. It's a highway capital reserve fund, which we established when we started doing the bridge work.
And that's where the 30,000
Would go. Yeah.
That's where, there's in a separate bridge fund, or was there?
There's not a separate bridge fund. It was for a time called Capital Bridge Fund, but it
Now it's Capital
was
Highway.
changed to Capital Highway, which includes bridges.
So that, but that would be bridge repairs.
It could also include bridge repairs.
That's another big one coming up.
Which one?
Two, the ones that washed out.
And the other thing is, if the 20,000, let's just say, I think Mark's gonna ask for another, I shouldn't say, but another 20,000 for this coming year. If that goes into the highway, can it be put on a separate line item? Kind of like the gravel roads upgrades?
Yeah, that's easy to do, although I think it's just as easy to keep it in the tree warden's budget personally.
If it can be in the tree wardens, that's the way I think it should be. If that's okay with Mark?
So it's okay with me.
I mean, he's the one that makes the decision on it.
And as far as the auditors are concerned, you know, they had the town spend a lot of time and energy to break out what was actually going into like miscellaneous and actually make line items and have it where it should be. And this seems like it's along that line. If it's a
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with it in the highway. I just think it should be earmarked.
definitely one way or the other.
I don't think it'd be, you know, a big deal for Mary to put in one more number,
Line, yeah.
line item. If it stays, but if it can go in Mark's.
Yeah, with that many decimal, it could go in either. We got a couple thousand off just.
What's the bike path maintenance?
What's that?
Bike
Bike path
path
maintenance is sweeping of the bike paths.
Nice. Sweeping.
Huh?
With the
For
skid
the
steer.
sweeper that picks it up, that Gary usually does, he does the sweeping of the intersections
Okay.
and stuff, picking up all that lovely sand that we put down.
And we're really glad that he does that.
Does he collect it and take it back?
We do, yes, we actually do collect it and take it back. Yep.
That's the pave where like a striped, like the Ferry Road coming up the hill or Churchill Road.
Correct, that is part of the
Dark
bike path,
lines.
is the painting the white lines. Dorset Street, basically from the railroad crossing up to Route 7 and then from Churchill to the school. Putting the pipeline outside.
Good deal, thank you.
Thank you.
Don't go anywhere.
Tree warden?
Well, since Junior's just presented, maybe we could start with the $20,000 request. Okay, so I think that's a good idea to keep in the budget for the coming fiscal year, if you guys approve it. I don't really care that much where in the budget it goes, but I do think it's wise to have those funds in there.
Just to be clear, the tree warden's budget is under miscellaneous. It's a line item, a one line.
One line item.
Yeah.
Maybe we would add the line, add a line.
Add a line to
Subsection
miscellaneous.
under that for
Tree,
ash
tree
trees.
removal.
Because that's probably not going to be an indefinite project.
It's a 5-year,
Yeah, we're expecting a 5-year plan. We'll have a much better sense after this coming year when we put out proposals, requests for proposals to see what the next, how much we get for the next round of $20,000.
so I had a question about that timing. There's still 10,000, half of the money is still available?
I think we've got $20,000 that we're going to spend this year.
Okay,
Okay.
and that is for the spring?
Yeah, we're gonna, we just had a meeting and we've identified, Junior and I and the rest of the group have tentatively identified some areas, 4 areas along Ferry Road and Greenbush Road where we'd like to work next. So,
Are you thinking of having that RFP be like one contract or 2 separate contracts?
we were thinking one contract, but we could do it 2 separate contracts.
I've been a little out of the loop on the process, so I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I defer to your judgment, really. How-
Yeah, I don't think there's any real reason to break it up, but, you know, if somebody could persuade me that that would make sense, we're, you know, open to it. Yeah.
No, I'm just, can you give us a little review of what went on at your meeting, your priorities? Just so that I didn't get to the meeting, I was hoping to
Yeah,
get there. but-
you guys should have gotten the minutes too from the meeting. You and Matt are on the list of
Yeah.
CCs. Did you get it? or-
I probably did, I did not have time to read them. So
Okay, just want to make sure that you got it. But,
Yeah,
and I can summarize it too.
yeah, that's all I want.
Yeah, right, so. For starters, we now have a complete census of the roadside ash trees in town. So anybody who cares to can take a look at this map. So all the trees in public spaces and in the public right-of-ways are mapped with the exception of the parks areas. So those aren't all mapped.
Right, and you had, and I read some of it too, you were at the point of identifying the size of the trees and
Right.
prioritizing, I'm assuming prioritizing the bigger trees to be done earlier rather than later.
Right, right. So this is something, it's a little bit of a conundrum to figure out, you know, where to prioritize. Because we decided that the big trees are going to be the largest problem when if they're allowed to die and fall on their own, they become very dangerous and expensive to deal with. So the idea was to prioritize the larger diameter trees first. And but then
it wouldn't really make sense to go around and sort of cherry pick the big trees around town because, and just ignore the, slightly smaller trees that are nearby. So we thought.
So pick a big tree and make that an area to focus on.
Right, so we tried to identify clusters. The criteria were areas where there were a larger portion of large diameter trees, and then roads that were heavily traveled were our current priorities. And so we picked Ferry Road and Greenbush Road for those reasons.
Right. I'm starting to remember some of it as I going along, that's all.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Yeah.
Is Greenbush north, south, or the whole thing?
It would be Greenbush Road north of Ferry Road is what we're looking at. And I can show you guys too. I'll send you some, I'll make some PDFs of maps so you can see. And we have yet to really make this public. And there'll be hearings, of course, and people can express their opinions about it. And depending on what people say, we might change our minds about it. We're also, Sue Smith is working on an article now that will appear in the Charlotte News soon, and we're inviting people to adopt ash trees too, or to contribute funds for the treatment of ash trees. And we're hoping that will yield some results, and that we'll be able to keep some good specimens.
And that's just in the town right away or on town lands?
Both.
Both.
Yeah.
Great. That expands it.
Carve my initials in there?
No, like to do that.
What?
We're gonna make little plaques.
Yeah, actually, yeah. We're gonna make little signs. Lost.
Double-sided tape.
Yeah.
No nails.
So I don't know if there's any more questions about that or the budget for the $20,000 part of it. So then for the budget, the tree warden budget, we're proposing a flat budget. And the only difference from last year is that we would like to spend some more money on outreach. So it turns out it's kind of expensive to send out a lot of letters. And so we need some money for that. We've been underspending on what we're really entitled to for mileage. And that's been kind of a preference of myself and the team. We haven't been fully billing the town, and we've enjoyed spending the small amount of money that's left over on projects like pruning and tree maintenance, if there's any left over. But in this case, I want to spend some money on outreach stuff, which would be, like I said, mailings, posters. When we have hearings, somebody has to be paid to record the minutes.
Have you put any thought into the meeting with, like, the Trails Committee or the Rec Commission on looking at the public lands to see if anything needs to be done?
Yeah, I haven't talked to the Trails Committee. I mean, I'm in touch with them, and we haven't had that discussion. But I did have a talk with the people from the state who manage parks and also the Nature Conservancy to kind of get a sense of what other people in the state are doing about trail systems. And the approach, again, because it came up in the context of the parks when I was in the Parks Committee. What are we going to do about the ash trees that are threatening the trails in the parks? And basically, people aren't worrying. The people who are responsible for managing these areas aren't going to invest time or money in eliminating ash trees along trails, because the probability of somebody happening to be on the trail at a time when the tree falls is low. Not to mention the horrible expense of having to remove these trees.
Yeah, I'm just talking about normal maintenance. I'm talking about going down to, we'll say, the beach and making sure that the trees are healthy, and what may need to be done in the spring before the beach opens, and we have public there that could be endangered.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to making sure.
Okay.
I was just wondering if I talked to you about this a while ago,
Yeah, so
just to see if you would tried to contact any of the other committees to see if you had tried to set up any time or any recommendations from them when they would want you to go down and look.
Yeah, I haven't done that, Frank, but we did for the beach, which is one of the big potential problem areas. We feel that that's addressed now. The hazard trees have been removed from the beach, and we don't have to worry about that for a while. And about other areas, I'm not really sure, but I'll make a point of contacting those folks. Trails Committee, and
You can go to the Trails Committee, you can talk to the park people. I mean, I know they do a lot of their own stuff, and they do a great job with it, but I mean, as with anything, it's nice to have another set of eyes.
Well, it'd be good to think of areas that, maybe not the trail itself, but trailhead parking.
Right, the trailheads are an exception to what I was talking about.
Whiskey Bay parking, that's not the beach, but you're likely to have cars parked on public property, and if they're there for a few hours, the odds of go up of a tree. So maybe not trail access, but probably vehicular access.
No, that's the exception, right. And for the parks, we do have a plan to remove the trees that are in the parking area when the time comes. But we're going to wait until the EAV actually hits for that.
Because they're small, compact, and...
They're small, and you know, and it's kind of a hard sell, you know, to remove trees, but I think and particularly in a very visible public place like that, and so my thinking with that is that, well, when trees are starting to fall down, then people are going to be, you know, more amenable to losing some.
Right.
So we're going to treat some of those trees too. We've identified keeper trees at that area, the parking area of the park. So we're going to keep a few trees.
Thank you. You've had a busy year.
Yeah.
Mark, you going to bring up the maintenance of the...
Yeah, thanks. So there's another part. There's in addition to what I've requested for the budget, these two things: the tree warden budget, flat budget, and then the $20,000 for ash tree removals. There are a couple of tree-related things that we'd like to get funded. One is air spading of trees in the town green, and the other is the replacement of, or the repair of the tree on the Quinlan Bridge that was damaged in that truck accident that mangled the guardrail. So we'd like to get that fixed. Right now it's kind of at a sharp angle, and it'd be nice to get that taken care of if we can get the money for it. Do you want to say something about the tree spading, Sue?
So
the air spading
we had Greg Rinaldo and Vince come by look at these red maples here that are starting to get a little die-off in the top. And they've got this problem with landscape fabric that was put around these trees at one time, and roots circling and cutting off the nutrients. So what they're recommending is they come in with an air spade and they get the dirt away, and then they'll prune the roots and then put the dirt back. And the estimate was about $600 to do all those trees. And then they will also look at the red maples over by the library. Had this kind of strange yellowness to them last year. And I think we need to do some, they said let's wait a year and do some soil tests, see what's going on over there. Because it was kind of a strange year last year with all that water and everything. So I'd estimate about $600 to improve the soil conditions for those trees so they're going to last longer. And I don't know what the cost would be for the oak tree by the bridge that's kind of over like this, if they're just going to say it's going to be removed or if they can stake it up or what. But it did leaf out last year.
We don't have an estimate for that, except at one
Did
point
they-
we were told the replacement would be.
On the $600 for these trees here, what's the difference between fixing these trees and replacing them?
Oh, let's see. Just putting in a little, you'd have to cut them down. And putting in new little trees would be just, a little thingamabob, at least $500 each. But these have reached a very nice size, so.
Just a question.
Oh, okay.
I'm not recommending that it get done, it was just a question.
It'd be expensive.
Yes.
So the air spading is really critically important for the health of these very prominent trees. I strongly recommend you find some money to take care of that.
So air spading is what?
It's a pretty cool thing, but what it involves is you take pressurized air and you blow out the soil, and it just leaves exposed roots. And then once the roots are exposed, you can see what's down there and do things like remove old planting fabric. Or what happens a lot with planted trees is that they're like, if they're in balls or in pots, the roots start going around like this, and then as the tree matures and grows, the roots eventually strangle the tree.
Girdling root, but an air spade doesn't fix that.
No, it doesn't,
No,
but it
it
exposes
doesn't.
the roots so that you can fix it. You can see them and you can fix it.
You can cut off.
So they're cutting off the ones
cut
that are
the
causing
girdling
the
root,
issues, and then they,
Yeah.
I assume they basically replant them. They put new soil in around
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, it's amazing technology.
Sounds like a unique project.
And how many, that seems reasonable then?
Yeah, I
That
think
amount of
it's
work
very
for
reasonable. I
$600.
think, but how many trees?
5 or 6 trees.
Yeah.
$100 a tree?
Yeah, pretty good price.
Yeah.
And they put the dirt back in.
Yeah, they put the dirt back in and the trees do okay.
Fall underneath our budget for the town hall?
I was wondering for the
Well,
maintenance
sometimes,
budget.
the trees are
Instead
put
of
in
tree
like,
warden, it'd be fall underneath the
5-gallon
maintenance budget.
pots and then removed
That's what I would think.
and then planted outside. Right.
A lot starts frequently with nursery-grown trees when they start,
Oh,
they
yeah,
plant
yeah.
the seedlings in the little thing,
Got it.
and the first root goes around. And if it's not broken out when they go from pot to pot to pot,
Exactly.
they ultimately, when the tree gets to be about 10 years old, 4 to 5 inches in caliber, is about the same time that the root has now expanded enough to pinch it all the way around.
Right, so you get a tree that looks nice for the first like 10 or 15 years, and then something starts happening where half the crown will start to die, and that can be the cause.
Are we gonna see that with other trees, do you think? Other town-owned trees, or you want them all air spade?
I don't think so.
No, I hope not, but it is important to have a reputable person plant your tree and do it right. Make sure the basket comes off and the
Burlap.
and the burlap and all that stuff and that they're put in at the right depth. That's another thing that kills trees. That they're the mulch that goes around, like these had a mulch problem over the years. They were mulched like this, so we're going to be taking that down. So, it's important to do the right thing all along, but early, what you do early is like raising a child, I guess. If you do things wrong, it's going to stay wrong in the early.
So the question is, what account would this be in?
Oh, yeah, that was the big question.
Seems like town maintenance.
Town hall
There's a
maintenance,
town lands category, but there's not like
or would it be town hall maintenance?
town hall? Town hall maintenance?
Yeah.
You're gonna do it in the spring? Is that what you're saying? When are you gonna do the?
Was it the maintenance and repair fund?
That would be capital fund?
What do we do the mowing and the mulching under the?
There is a.
That's under town lands.
There's the village mowing, and that includes tree mulching.
I guess we could put it in there.
It's kind of maintaining the landscape would
Right.
be the closest
It is.
category we got.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, sounds good.
Appreciate your support.
Thank you.
The Shaw Historical Society, welcome, thanks for waiting.
Well, I find myself in an unusual position, because I guess what I'm asking about this evening is something the town already pays for that I'm looking for a bump up. Okay, because the building, the museum itself is a town asset, town structure. And at this time, the town does the lawn, the electricity, the phone. We're finding that since we don't have internet there, we're pretty well hamstrung with how we monitor our systems. And so we're looking for the absolute basic internet addition to that. We don't need a gold-plated thing, because we're not running a lot of data through there at all. But we can't upgrade anything. We can't upgrade our alarms, we can't monitor the systems. So we're looking at, did you get a packet from?
Yes.
Okay. We're looking to add the basic internet. And we can do it with our current copper line or add fiber. Fiber is free, because that's how the Waitsfield Champlain Valley Telecom is doing it. And the possibility is also, we might be able, that's $46.95, I think it was, for the add the internet. If we bundle that with a phone, I think we can drop that to about $6 a month, to about $38.95. But that would be in addition to the current line item for the phone budget that you would have. So I'm kind of asking if that could be done. The second thing I wanted to ask for is to help us help the town preserve the building, which is a one-time purchase of a preservation environment monitor. That would be placed in the building. It would monitor heat and humidity. It's downloaded onto a stick or a USB flash drive, and we have a consultant that is world-renowned who would be monitoring that for us for free. So, and also the program that provides it, as long as you're using under 3 monitors, the program is free. So all it is just a one-shot deal. These monitors last for 20 years. And that's $350 on a one-shot purchase. The other thing that we were looking at for the future is storm windows to protect the original glass that's on the structure. One of the things I heard tonight from Junior, he talked about a grant. And I never even thought about it till tonight, that maybe a building grant through historic structures of some form from the state might be able to pay for that. So it wouldn't come out of the taxpayers at all. But I can't ask for it because it's not our building.
So I think you can research it, and then when the
I'd be happy to.
time comes to sign the dotted line, Selectboard could do that.
Because Dean had talked about a reserve fund capital improvement in the future. The place has been there since 1850 with no storm windows. We can wait a year or two. It's not a huge issue, but no, I think a grant might save the taxpayers a ton.
I wonder if efficiency Vermont would be another.
Yeah. Certainly possible.
Well, yeah, with
Certainly
that
possible.
thing that they're advertising, trend, yeah,
With their
energy.
With their new windows they're talking about.
Yeah.
Their new storms that they build.
Yeah.
They came to us, to
It's
tell us
part
about
of
those.
Transition
Transition
Charlotte,
from
and
Vermont or transition
Vermont.
Charlotte sort of thing.
efficiency.
Efficiency. they basically make a wooden frame.
Yeah.
And they have those shrinkable windows, but they go around the whole thing. And then it sits right in, just sets in the hole on the outside, so it gives you the 2 layers of plastic in a dead airspace, which may,
Yeah, I think primarily what our concern is protecting the glass.
With
Well-
another layer, but.
With either that
Or-
or breathable Lexan, which is not a heck of a lot more expensive than glass and less prone to breakage from tree branches or anything like that.
true.
We're looking like at a 6 mm Lexan system. We don't want to try to hold heat in the building because that increases our humidity in the summer. And in the wintertime, we let the temperature float, which allows the humidity to stay higher. So the building is actually better in the middle of the winter when it's 0 to 10 degrees with no heat in the building whatsoever. So what we're hoping to find out with the studies, if you approve the preservation monitor, is to tell us what we need to know, whether we need to do anything in additional or whether we don't need to do anything at all. And it also helps not only preserve the building, but also our collection. So it would help everybody. But happy to answer any questions.
No, I think the thing to do is, like you said, is to maybe look into, see if there are any grants that can be used to help this project.
I'm feeling a little guilty here. I think it was probably months ago when somebody came and said the trim is rotting on the museum. And I stopped by and looked at it and then just, yes, it is. It needs to be repaired. So we'll look into getting that next summer, getting the trim on the west side it was.
You want to put money in the budget for that? Is that?
I'm thinking it's probably gonna be a few $100, I hope. It's limited to 1 or 2 boards and a paint. But it may be time to get up on a ladder and go around the building, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think when we had, there was the Vermont League of Cities and Towns stop by and was worried about some branches over the roof. And I think they were gonna do cutting the branches and also the gutters. Because that's been a problem in the past. The gutters get filled up and then that backs up in and wrecks the soffits. So I don't know if that could be something in a future budget that you might think about for the building, just to keep that clean so that it doesn't cause any problems and would save a lot of money. We're loaded with ideas.
How often do you meet?
We are the most infrequent, loose bunch of goofballs that you ever want. We call ourselves a hysterical society, so we meet as needed. And if you're interested, you can stop by the museum coming up next Sunday. We're having our Christmas party, so stop in and see what we've got. Any questions?
I often go to the Christmas party.
1 to 4. This time, we're not conflicting with the Congregational Church's Messiah Sing, because they've done it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming out.
Okay, still got an hour's worth of meeting.
No, we're almost done.
1 to 4. Do we catch up?
Pretty much.
So are people okay with putting money in the budget for the monitoring, the $350?
Yeah.
Yes.
A select board budget.
Probably ought to put something under town buildings for, I don't know.
For the soffits and the cleaning of the
A
gutters.
building that's that old, once you start poking at the wood, you don't know what kind of can of worms you're gonna open up, so. At least like $500 or something, a placeholder to. at least fix the one. It's obvious from standing on the street. I forgot all about that till he gets it. Oh, boy.
Select board.
Probably catch up and just say, do you have any questions? Or,
Yeah.
mostly, I think, probably the main changes are under other, other items. So, you know, if you want to jump to that, I'm fine going through any of the other ones too, but let me know how you want to proceed.
I'm not sure that the park security needs to go up. Why is that?
That's for opening and closing the gates at the park, and it hasn't changed in quite a while.
Well, 2 years. Is that 17?
So we're in 23.
Oh, you're talking, right. You're talking way out there.
Or 4.
No,
Yeah.
21.
We're budgeting for 21, yeah.
So it'd be 5 years. Winter plowing, what's that again? At zero. Remains
Junior
at
does
zero.
it, but no cost to the town.
We have it covered. It's in Junior's budget.
Thank you. You shovel too. You shovel the walkways.
Oh, yeah.
Shovel the ones here. Nobody else wants to do them.
And the post office, who does the post office?
Sometimes we-
Senior center.
That's sweet.
Do we plow town beach parking lot in the winter?
No.
Okay.
You do a turnaround? Or not even?
I just plow in because I drive down to the covered bridge, but I can't go through it, so I have to back up to turn around. So I just plow in and make a swoop over, if there's much snow. It has not been plowed at all this year yet, you know, because we haven't had no snow this season.
Oh, there.
We don't plow it.
You're right, you don't plow. Yeah.
I had
That's
to
what
go
those
by-
dead trees are
I had to
for.
go by the town beach on Saturday.
Oh, I see. The north side.
And somebody had gone in and done some donuts.
And how much did we take out of the improvement and repair fund for the fence at Barber Hill?
It was, I want to say, in the neighborhood of 1,400 is, I did look at that.
Just to help them get through it?
I need to get bids on the town sign.
I'm sorry?
I need to get bids on the town sign.
I'm gonna need to get back to you on that, Carrie.
Okay.
I don't have
I mean, if it's that dollar amount, that's,
Time to donate the other part and pay them later.
I have to say, the legal expense, it's just, we've made a consistent effort, in the 5 years I've been doing this, to minimize our legal expenses, and we've significantly lowered them, and I think without increasing our exposure or liability.
Sorry, we spent some money today.
What were you trying to bring it back up?
well, I think that there should be a dollar amount put on for the solar company, can't think of the name right now. That's
Green
what,
Lantern?
their lawyer's gonna be talking to our lawyer.
Well, it's usually broke down anyways, right?
No, but
Dean?
there should be a limit, a time limit.
First year profit. Money savings, if not 2
A
years
time
worth,
limit.
just to pay for the attorney.
I think, often what really drives legal is if we get involved in litigation, and so far we've been avoiding that for.
Also, yeah, and I think having a
Mediation.
budget that can accommodate that is something that is a known quantity when people consider appeals to the town. The money unspent is returned to the taxpayers each year. So here, Dean's recommending lowering it to 40,000, but it's not the type of budget item that I've seen where the goal is to exactly match an expected use.
But the Green Lantern's attorney and our attorney should have some sort of limit on conversation about solar.
Should come out of the energy committee budget.
Right, something.
Library.
Especially if it's,
I have a question.
Yes?
Sorry. So I was just trying to figure out what the total amount is being requested for the year, and if it's higher or lower. I just couldn't find that.
We're not quite there yet.
Gotcha.
Mary has been tallying it, and that will probably be December 16th. We'll have.
Okay. I just didn't know if I needed to include it in like the other ones, just like higher or lower or whatever. Okay, that works. Thank you.
So if you're ready, there were a couple of items that were in addition, that are outside the regular operating budget that I checked into, just if you want to consider. Well, for one, I guess before we get into that, is the cost of living increase potentially. Very preliminarily, it looks like that could be in the neighborhood of 1.3% or 1.4%. That's been, up to October in terms of the numbers. That's where that's currently at. So there had been discussion about checking the market on pay rates, although the salary administration policy doesn't actually call for that. It calls for checking job descriptions and seeing if they're current, and if they're not current, then seeing if they are updated, or if they've been updated and the job scoring hasn't been reevaluated, that should be done. That said, there had been some talk about doing a market update, so I checked with Frank Sadowski, Galbreath Flynn, about doing an update. He's actually headed into partial retirement, but he said he could do it either, himself this spring, or he could guide somebody if we're doing it in the budget year FY21, and it would cost in the neighborhood of $7,500.
from what I understand, it's gotta be done.
Yeah, but there's two things, right? Are there two separate things going on, Dean? Yes, I mean, I just don't know. One is the job description, right? And didn't we agree to do that into 5 years?
To review them, yeah, the policy definitely says check the job descriptions. If they've been updated and the scoring hasn't been updated, then that should be done.
Okay, so that's one task.
Yes.
And the other task is to see whether the pay rates are at market.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to understand.
Is that in our policy to do a market check?
No.
No, only if a position can't be filled, I thought.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand. But what we need to do, according to our own policy, is to check the job descriptions.
Yes.
Okay.
What good's that do?
Well, it could change someone's.
Well, for example, the amount of things that the state may have added to certain jobs, like the clerk treasurer or the lister, have added requirements that
Cost that would require us to increase the pay.
Well, not necessarily. If the pay is kind of based on the pay rate is based on the knowledge needed to do the job. If they've added
Yeah.
something that just takes more time, it may not increase the rate, but it may increase the hours that somebody needs to do it. Now, if they've added something that's significantly more complicated or takes more training, then you evaluate it to see if the actual rate goes up. So it's, kind of like if I'm adding 4 driveways to that I plow, it's not like I gotta have a different plow, but if I'm, doing something different, then the rate goes up. So the evaluation is to see if the jobs have significantly changed according to the criteria needed to complete that job.
So at this point, we're just talking about budgeting, whether, how much you want to budget for that. And maybe it's, at this point, something, or we can come back to that on next week. And then some items for the improvement and repair reserve fund. You had been budgeting for the replacement of this roof for a couple of years, and the estimate is around 68, or was a few years ago, 68,900. Probably it's crept up since then, if we were to get a fresh estimate, but so maybe you'd want to aim for 70,000. So you probably need to budget in the neighborhood of 25,000 to keep something left over in the fund.
I agree.
Well, where else did we spend the money? How much money were the ash trees? $10,000? And the cemetery was $1,500. Where's the rest? How did we spend the rest of our money?
I don't think it was, well, the generators.
Generators were actually a net gain because
Yeah.
we had a $50,000 bond and we only spent 34 on them or something, so.
Yeah. But I
For that
think we
account,
gave
it was a moneymaker.
Well, I think we gave the difference back when we were calculating the tax rate. It was included as an extra, as a.
Yeah. Well, that was the
It's a
question.
surplus.
If you got a bond and you've taken the money and you don't spend it all,
They don't let you return it.
you
Lower your
can't give
payment.
it back, so you just put it in the next best account.
So I've been noticing the town hall sign out here has some maintenance issues that probably in another year or two will need to be replaced. Perhaps. So I got a quote from the company that fabricated it, $1,500 or $1,100, $1,150.
Can you keep that quote? I think we're gonna be looking
Yeah.
for a lot of places to save this
Sure.
year.
Oh, yeah.
That's my
Sense, yeah.
sense of the numbers.
Yeah, it's just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
Then moving on to actually, Junior talked about, Frank talked about, is looking at the flea market as a possible site for town salt shed, town garage. So I wondered if you wanted to put money in their improvement repair fund to start doing some planning for that. I did get some estimates from firms that do kind of engineering. They can look at wetlands, they can figure out, actually, I think it's up to us to figure out what is needed in terms of, the structures. But once we know that, laying them out in terms of turning radius for vehicles and how close the building should be and all that. It's not, depending upon the extent of it may not be 6,000, but there's probably steps. Once you know what you want, then you can go through permitting, or you could get cost estimates. So, depending upon how much you want to go with it.
My take is we budgeted the money in the highway capital reserve fund and not to double budget it here.
That was for
the salt shed?
Okay, the salt shed, the 20,000 or 30,000. Oh, no, that's for the Moncton Road.
That's for Moncton Road, but just talking about I think the discussion after that was monies that do build up or that we can build up would be thinking long-term as that fund increases for the salt shed. And
I think what we did is we earmarked 30,000 to go into the Highway General Reserve Fund.
For
in,
Moncton, for Moncton Road.
in hoping that we didn't need to use it all. And whatever is left could be towards the salt shed or any other things that Junior may need. And then hopefully have a continuing amount added to that every year to build it up.
but it just seems premature to me, and I may be alone on this, of starting a process of looking at relocating a town garage and creating a park and ride at the flea market. That seems a little early as far as the bandwidth we have and the projects in front of us.
I think the park and ride, I mean, a few years previously, we beat that one up pretty good too, and it just got dropped that nobody wanted it, so
Going
all of a
strong
sudden,
now, isn't it though, Dean, right?
all of a sudden to pop up with wanting money for it when the last select board action was to let it die is not appropriate.
But it's been brought back to the table.
Yeah, it's a different animal. It's it's a committee that's looking at not a state park and ride, but a town local park and ride instead of,
Which will cost money in the future.
5 or 10 spaces. Or
This isn't a town committee, though.
It is.
It is.
Some members of the Energy Committee, Carrie was at the meeting, Frank stopped in but left.
When did we put it together? What committee is it?
It's ad hoc, I announced it.
It was supposed to be a village parking.
Village
committee.
Parking Committee, yeah.
But now it's a park and ride.
Out on,
I think a volunteer ad hoc effort is okay. I just think it's way premature to be budgeting money for that.
Yeah, and
They've
maybe it's not the
already-
park and ride, but
it's
it
already-
could potentially be town, I guess it's how, doing something before you need to do it is I think what a possibility is.
right, but
We have a
but if in the
presidential,
future it comes down to where Junior's over there with the salt shed
vote coming up.
and a
it's-
garage, what does that do to a park and ride?
Well, leave the park and ride out of it. Look
No,
at,
I'm just saying, what would that do to a park and ride being there?
I think the priority is the garage and the salt shed.
That's what I was gonna say. I basically just put that out there, that the board keeps it in mind that in the future, we are gonna need these. And the flea market, in my opinion, is an excellent place for the future highway, town shed, whatever, salt shed, because of its location. So I just don't want things like, a park and ride, I'm not against the park and ride, but if you have a town shed there, you need places to store some material. So if you have something, storm on a weekend and you don't have the material, none of the pits are open, so it would be nice to be able to have stuff. So it's like, just keep in mind that we need room other than just a building.
So all I'm saying is that planning process can take a year, the permitting process can take a year, construction process can take a year, so you're looking 3 or 4 years out. So if you have a goal of that, you have to think about how far, backing that up, when do you want to start the planning?
So are you going along with you, Matt? Are you suggesting that we put an extra, instead of having 6,000 in this select board, would you rather put $36,000 into Junior's reserve fund?
well, we're not done with that fund yet.
Because of
Bridge repairs.
Yeah, I think any planning for the highway
Gotta throw a
department
monkey wrench
should
in
be
there.
funded from the highway department. So if it's looking at reciting the town garage or putting up a auxiliary structure to start on a different parcel, like the salt shed storage,
I would think
that
preliminary
would be in the
work
highway.
for that could be done without hiring a consultant with the idea of what size square foot we need, draw the picture of a road kind of thing. You gotta give somebody a consultant an idea to start with, otherwise, if you don't want, pay them to come up with your idea for you.
For the most part, I think Junior would be able to come up with a square footage of a bunker that he needs for his sand and salt.
Where he needs stuff for piles and how big the road needs to be.
I'd
to
leave
go
it
in
up
and
to
out.
Junior to recommend the area that's required in the building that might be required for it.
I mean, I agree with Dean that we need to start somewhere, at least the planning stage of it, because who knows when we're gonna have to.
Well, maybe we put a couple $1,000 in there just so we can work with somebody and they can put it on a.
So that'd be going into the Highway Capital Reserve Fund.
Yeah, and get an idea,
So we can
because
get
the
somebody to
thing,
map it out.
the thing that might be the trigger is the water runoff. At some point in time, the lake water quality people are gonna figure that one out.
Well, Shelburne's first.
And it might move up to the top of the list, not by our choice.
Yeah, that's definitely possible.
Right.
Currently, it's just grandfathered.
Well, yeah, it's grandfathered, you know, and it's been there, you know, Jeff was down there, and then now we're down there, and it's just, you know, there is a spot, if you drive by 7 and you look out in the swamp, there's a spot that there's no grass growing. And it's from concentrated salt over the years, it is,
From the brine they're putting on Route 7?
no.
Just checking.
It's from the sand pile.
Sounds like a
you know,
trip.
over the years.
Yeah, sure.
Could be the brine.
Just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
You know, so far, nobody has really said anything, and, you know, and basically they say that that's the best place for it is a swamp, you know, because of all the microorganisms that kind of eat that stuff up, but there is a dead spot there.
Okay, so I guess two more items. One is bollards and lighting. Their energy committee and others, I think Christina was involved with looking at the potential for changing the fixtures to LED. They put some money in their budget, but I think they're considering that half. And then in addition to that, looking at the bollards, there are 4 bollards out there. Mo Harvey gave me a cut sheet that I think is probably on the very low side. That was around $280 per fixture. A little bit of checking into them, they're probably more in the range of 600 or so for something that's going to last.
I talked to Dean briefly about those and said that we want to make sure we get something that's like all aluminum or cast aluminum, not something that's painted steel, because that's not going to last.
So dark out there. I don't. Why can't you just put better overhead lighting?
Actually, a consultant did wonder about that, if that's a possibility.
Is there a reason why we
But
can't?
you have to find somebody that, electricians tend not to be willing to come and provide you with an estimate, at least the ones that I've called
Have you
several.
called like Steve Spadazzini?
I did.
Wait a minute, he has to work for me first before he works for anybody else.
Oh, okay.
Just saying.
They're so busy.
No, I know, I'm not, no, I'm number 1 on his list.
Well, no, I know, they're just so
Sorry.
busy.
I do my own, so I don't really.
No, we gotta get Pepper to the grass.
I would think that electricians and lighting consultants are different. I don't know if, what a consultant would charge.
Why do we need a consultant?
Lighting is not simple. You can spend an awful lot of money or a lot less money depending on the fixture, the height of the pole, the spread pattern, and all that other
Can't
stuff.
you call Green Mountain Power like what I have at the store and ask them to put up lights and
They're gonna
you rent them?
They're gonna put up a lot of lights so that the bill goes up.
And you rent them. like $1.
Well, we have
Oh, like the farm lights?
We have the,
system?
yeah,
No, the
except
lights in the
On the
parking lot.
poles? Yeah.
Yes.
That's like what they had at,
Why can't we do that here?
those don't really follow
Every
our
Norco has
ordinance
that one.
about where the light shines.
Yeah, I don't think those are compliant anymore with the, there's a down
Night
guy.
sky, the
They're not
night sky.
downshielded.
No, this is the new one. The new one is.
Yeah, I think CCS's isn't, it shines right into
But
your eyes.
they might have,
Beautiful. CCS looks like it's alive
really
and
pretty.
well. It's very pretty.
There's someone who, one of the energy committees contacted and she emailed, and I think she does consulting, so I'll send her
Regards.
her regards to you. Anyway, just throw it out there.
well, then if you start replacing the bollards with the pole lights, and the spacing is wrong because you got so many close bollards. I mean, one big pole would cover 5 bollards, but you need a different foundation, so there's.
Well, we've got one light that covers 14 parking spots. So if you got 28 here, can't you just have 2 lights?
New conduit, new poles, new foundations.
Okay, so we need a consultant
Must
who's willing,
be.
who lives in town, is willing to do this pro bono. What's the consensus on the bollards and the lighting? You want to start from scratch or look at retrofitting what we have? Seems like that's
It's above my pay
the
grade,
decision
no
point.
idea.
The library, well, some of the things are falling over.
Yeah, one was hit last winter, right?
I know that the library changed out a couple of them to LEDs. I don't know what they spent when they did it. Because
Are they gonna be putting up
Something
new
to
lighting?
they're
recommendation,
putting up
figure out
identical,
what they
the
put
same
in.
old bollards, they're reusing them, but they put LEDs in them, so at least they're less energy, but these are getting pretty ratty looking. The lenses are cloudy, they're crooked, they're starting to.
Well, we want the energy committee to give us a recommendation, put that on their projects
Sure.
list for this year. Let's look at the lighting in the town hall parking lot.
Did they ever do anything with these lights? Were they ever gonna put in LEDs?
Well, that's what they put in 2000, I think, in their budget for.
Was to change these?
Some of them. I don't think that would do everything, but I think that would be some of them.
What are these lights? You can't just change those ones up there to LED.
Those
You
are
can't go to-
fluorescent. You can
You
change,
can't go to
you
Home
can
Depot.
change the bulb, but then you're still using a lot of electricity because it goes through a capacitor and a starter. So you
Ballast.
basically have to, yeah, ballast, you basically have to take all that stuff out and redo the lights, which then starts to get labor intensive. I mean, these are hidden in a trough. I just go buy a string of LEDs and a rope and plug them in one end. Because those are hidden, they'd be easy to fix, easier. But then you have to start worrying about the color of LEDs, because there's
You don't usually have the soft light.
But the new
cheap
ones,
ones.
there's new ones that have, I just put some in an apartment thing, and just these cheap little, they were like $12 fixtures that fit in looked like recessed lights, and they were this obnoxious color, and I said to the electrician, you gotta change them. And he pulled them down and he just turned the knob until they matched the others, so now they come with an adjustable
Wow.
temperature. So if we fumble around with this for another year or two, it's gonna get cheaper to get matching LEDs.
Have a dial.
Wow, I haven't heard about that.
I was surprised the heck out of me. I mean, he just took the screwdriver until it matched.
Wow.
Nice. Technology.
Ken?
I just want to point out, since we're talking about the building, you've heard this before from me, but some acoustical treatment in here would go a long way to making it a more pleasant space, and I think would help some of the folks that have some hearing impairments as well. We did a project at our common house at 10 Stones with a very similar building with a cathedral roof like this, and we actually fabricated the panels, and we hired someone to bring some scaffolding in to mount them, and the whole project was under a couple $1,000. Could make a big impact. impact, so something to think about.
And that's for sound dampening?
Exactly, yeah.
A quilt display.
Hmm?
More quilts on the wall.
I helped make that quilt.
Really?
Yeah. What I really wanted to do was leave notes inside it. But
In the batting?
The last item was just whether the bicycle lanes in the villages are, I thought they were painted at one point, but they're faded, so maybe they were never painted. I thought it was just discussed a few years ago, and I thought that was approved, but maybe it wasn't.
Well, we did an experimental amount, I think a quarter mile in each direction of
so.
the village, just for the fog lines.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was biking related.
Oh, okay.
It was
The
for-
fog lines.
Yeah.
That's
that
what I
was
was thinking of.
$1,400 or something, and it did both villages. Was that about right?
No, just the west shore. We never put any in East Shore.
I thought we did.
No, I thought we did.
To Nichols. It was like a quarter mile, and then
Really?
No,
a quarter
we
mile
never
up
painted it.
here.
We think we talked about it, but just,
That never happened.
we tried to do it here first to see if we thought it worked.
I think it was just here.
Just here.
So do you have to come to the conclusion did it work or not?
Well, I thought we did. I feel like there were white lines
No
going by
accidents.
Johnny Sheehan's house, no? So
If
that
there was,
narrowed.
you should be able to still see signs of them, because you can still see signs of the ones over here, and they were done at the same time. I think it was just the west shore,
It was just
the four ways. I could be wrong, but I don't think so.
Rarely wrong.
It's not wrong.
Not challenging. So redo that quarter mile out of the safety budget? That's where it came out of last time?
Do we think it worked? I think it did.
You think it did? Did it? Did.
I made a conscious effort of the times that I was driving up Ferry Road to see if people actually slowed down when they got to those lights, to the start of the lines, and I think they actually did. I was surprised. I had like 2 or 3 cars, three times, while I remembered it.
Usually they're too far over and they have to slow down to get back in the center of their lane.
Whatever reason they have to slow down, yeah, they did.
Seems narrower.
I don't mind as long as they make the lane wide enough. What I found in some places is they don't make the lanes wide enough.
give me the bike lane.
No, the travel lane.
Travel lanes.
When I drive my school bus, I'll have one tire just about on the yellow line and one tire on the white line, because they don't make the lanes wide enough.
Oh, and the reason that was explained to us is that's a traffic calming mechanism.
And that's why they wear out, is because
People are driving on it.
because the school buses and the trucks are driving on them all the time.
Definitely.
We weren't taught to ride on those lines, were we?
Yeah, but I have no
No.
choice.
It's just that comfortable distance of when you have oncoming traffic.
Right,
Do you
but if
stay
you're saying
not on the
traffic
line?
calming, you keep your,
When
you don't ride on the yellow or the white.
It makes you,
Making it narrower
it
makes
makes you
it
conscious of it,
feel like
and you
a
feel like you
tighter
need to
road,
slow
so you
down
need
because
to
I'm not in
drive
my
more
lane.
Because
slowly.
it's like
It's
it's
the
like they're
effect.
narrowing the road for you, so you have to be more careful to
Visually.
stay on it. But
That was the recommendation from the
I'm
traffic
just,
calming study.
I'm just putting down the point that I usually can't stay off the white line at all, because they're not, a lot of times the roads are not wide enough where the white lines and the yellow lines are. And I'm sure Junior has that problem with his trucks.
Yeah, as long as we don't put white lines up like Shelby.
They're not straight.
the striper and the 6-pack and go to town.
I do love the roads being paved in the spring, though. I was gonna tell you that before.
I think it's
It's
great.
really
Have
beautiful.
more bicyclists and the walkers have got good blacktop to walk on, instead of having time, we get put off until like, well, sometimes it's November, and then it's cold and you don't get as good a job.
I keep meaning to tell you, every time I drove down to the beach or wherever, like, oh, Good thinking.
So we're now in an overview and discussion.
Yes.
A bridge repair? Did that was in the, did that get sent out the meeting? I wasn't here, the pictures?
It got sent out to the select board, is that what you said? Yeah, I thought I did.
Yeah, you gave it to us last time.
Yeah.
The pictures of where it got eroded away underneath the bridges.
So I don't know if there's been any progress as to whether or not we're going to get any kind of,
I've heard that there was a disaster declared for infrastructure. I haven't heard anything as far as them saying, you know, there's a process for getting paid. I think it's probably gonna be do the work first and then get reimbursed, but I don't know, you know, I haven't heard anything, but I can check in about it.
so at this point, were there any, when I wasn't here, did you guys look over those?
No, I think we waited for you to come back to give us
So, well,
more
I'll give you
information.
the quick one. On the Dorset Street Bridge, there's the abutment on the north end, and it sits on dirt, and then there's a bunch of rocks that protect this dirt from the water. So the water has washed through the rocks underneath a good portion of the concrete. So now the abutment on the west side is in the air, to the point where we could stick a broomstick at the end of your arm as far in as you could reach and didn't hit the dirt. Dorset Street has intermittent support that's in the water. So normally if a regular bridge settles one way or the other, it doesn't hurt the structure as much because it's held up on either end. When you put a support in the middle and all of a sudden you take everything away from one end of it, now you're putting a big stress on that beam. So Dorset Street Bridge of all of ours is the only one with the intermittent support. And if that settles any amount, it can significantly damage the beam to the point where you'd have to redo it. So that one is probably, we need to fix it. The fix is you get somebody in there with mortar and they mortar up all the cracks and then they pump a really loose or liquid
So they
grout into
they
it.
frame around it and pump in.
Frame it or just grout the rocks like a mason would, a quick grout job. The one on the Segment Bridge is supported by those red rocks. I mean, they're milled, they're square. And on the upstream side, the water has washed all of the chinking and grouting out of the rocks on the, I guess it's the east side or the north side. It's kind of weird. Anyway, one side's concrete, the other one's the stones. And it's to the point where one of the stones already at the very bottom is broken because it's washed out. I looked at it the day after it rained and I noticed that all the stuff was washed out. And then I went there like a week and a half later with the engineer and noticed that one of the rocks is cracked right down the middle. So that has shifted enough to break a rock that's 3 feet by 3 feet by 6 feet long in half. Crack it all the way down the middle. So that's another one where they need to do the same thing. They need to patch and grout. So the estimates
40 and...
from the engineer was like 65,000 or
Yeah.
68,000, and it hasn't gone out to bid. My dartboard number was 75, so at least we're sort of close. But I don't know if there's any grants available for that, but if that you get a big wash in the spring and the Dorset Street Bridge may have to be closed. So that's something we should probably do sooner than later. If we put it in the budget now, it's going to be next year anyway, but still. That's a reserve fund, so I guess.
Right, it'll carry over.
We'll have to go over it.
Go around.
Another bus, take you in from the other side.
So anyway, I would recommend putting like I said, a placeholder for 70,000 in there for bridge repair. That it probably should be done as soon as we can.
And, I mean, there's a possibility some of that might be able to be reimbursed through FEMA. But, I mean, at this point, we don't know, but we
It's not-
would have to pay for it upfront anyways.
Yeah, it's something that we shouldn't wait to see if we can get a grant to do. Something we should do.
And pursue getting reimbursed by FEMA.
Yeah.
So yeah, Fritz, you had asked me for request for proposal type.
Well, I told Dean, we've got the thing from the engineer. I mean, that's enough. It's a simple enough fix where you can send it out, and if anybody's interested, we can just meet them in the field and say, it's an obvious thing that people that do that work would know what to do, so it would be a very easy RFP. I told Dean to come up with one with standard boilerplate on it, and we'll attach the engineer's picture and his description of the repair and
Yep.
send it out. So another budget item.
Big year. No more discussion? Okay, move that forward.
Looking at the wrong person. Oh, this Thompson's Point lease, we can do that, yeah.
Correct, yeah, we'll move on to that. We have an hour budgeted for the budget, next meeting,
Okay.
and that's without any presentations. 8:45, Thompson's Point lease for lot 124.
Can I just say one very quick thing about budget? Planning Commission, after going to regional planning to look at East Charlotte Village traffic calming study, CCRPC said they would do a 80-20 match. Well, there was an application process which the select board would have to approve. If we got their grant, we would be responsible for 20,000, which could be in the neighborhood of 3,000 or 4,000. So Planning Commission is asking for 4,000 in their budget addition.
Yeah, Peter was gonna come by next meeting.
Okay.
That's what I told him in backboard asking.
Okay.
If we pencil that in, at the next meeting, we'll have a cumulative budget. We
Yeah.
could have that in there for now.
It's nice to know, but I mean, he's gonna be in for it.
So anyway, Thompson's Point.
I'll make a motion to renew the lease for Susan and Michael Garner for lot 24 at 910 Flat Rock Road for 20 years.
Lot 124?
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Is that authorizing?
Chair to sign.
Friendly amendment.
Any more discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? I think I'll punt the town report for the December 16th meeting. I can run that by you. And if I can get to it sooner, maybe I'll email a draft out to everyone. If that's okay?
Oh, all right.
There won't be any typos. Promise.
Sure.
Do we want to look at minutes tonight?
I actually had a question even though I wasn't.
Or look at that next meeting? This is pretty much the pleasure of the board. We're about a half an hour over.
Can we defer that? I would give my comments to
For the
the minutes, I can speak.
Yeah, come on.
Just hang out there.
We'll postpone the minutes, approving minutes until next meeting.
And Dean, I'll give you my comments then.
Okay.
Select board updates.
I was wondering, does Mary still go to the Thompson, the wastewater, Thompson Point's wastewater? Okay, very good.
I move that we go into executive session to discuss litigation with Charlotte Solar.
Just one quick thing to add. Graffiti.
Oh,
New subject.
Graffiti.
where?
Right now I've seen the Carpenter Road Bridge foundations or abutments are nicely painted with a variety of colors and messages. It's kind of common knowledge or historical knowledge that if you don't get on graffiti removal right away, it becomes ugly.
It grows.
So. making us aware of that issue. That's all I needed to update, and it's there. And we should think about painting it or whatever.
Scraping it off.
Probably not this time of year, but.
I'll second.
One other thing that I gotta do here before we go into that. There are 3 change orders for the library that I would like you guys to authorize me to sign. They are all out of budget items. One is out of the site work budget item, which is the sidewalk and the main entrance from the south side of the building. The second one is out of the contingency. We needed to replace, they were gonna reuse the entry doors and the vestibule doors for the new part, but save some demolition money because they wanted doors on the inside. The old vestibule has become a electronic computer room kind of thing. So they wanted doors to close that from the rest of the library, so they're gonna leave the existing vestibule door
Put
on
on
the
some
inside,
put on
not
some
bother to do any demo, save that money, but that means we had to buy 2 new doors to go to the outside. And they were pretty tattered anyway. So the one, that one's $4,000. The one for the sidewalks is $13,000. And the first one is $2,042 for the rest of the fuel tank removal. They took the tank out, but they just put all the muck and stuff back in, so we had to take that all back out again and recompact it with decent dirt. But they don't, none of these affect the bottom line. They're all part of
Contingencies?
well, one's
Or-
contingency, the other 2 are budget line items that weren't defined
General conditions?
under REARC's contract. They were under the stuff on the bottom of that we had town work.
Yep.
Fritz, can we have just those amounts again? And
Fuel tank subgrade is $2,042.94. The main entry doors are $4,808.89. And the sidewalk at the main entry is $13,468.75. So I'm not supposed to authorize payment unless you guys tell me I can.
Do we need a formal motion?
So I'm looking for action to authorize me to sign those 3 change orders.
So moved. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Should we wait for the vote?
I don't care.
No, we don't need you to just forward.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
Thank you.
All those in favor of going into executive session to discuss litigation, Charlotte Solar, indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Is this gonna be in and done?
This will be the end of the meeting. No action is expected, and we'll be adjourning as soon as we come out of executive session.
so you can go
Thank
in.
you.
Oh.